What's life like working with billionaires? Years ago, a friend of mine's dad was trying to sell his startup company and picked up an investor at the airport. He was proud of his classic Rolls-Royce and noticed the investor looking around, playing with the air vents. So he said, "Is this your first time in a Rolls-Royce?" And the guy said, "No, but it was his first time in the front seat. That's a flex." He managed time very differently than anyone I was used to. Like, our meeting with him began precisely on schedule, lasted 30 minutes, and there was no chit-chat. Before this meeting, we had a pre-meeting with his admin to discuss expectations. The admin explained that we had to be on time, no introductions or titles, just name, no small talk, no marketing, be prepared to answer technical and financial questions quickly and succinctly. For the latter, if there were numbers, we had to know precisely which page of the material had the information. When the meeting took place, we were brought in exactly to the second at the starting time. Sat down, and within 30 minutes he was asking us all manner of questions. I had to field technical questions that appeared to be asked not so much for whether my answer was right, but that I didn't hesitate. I also gained a healthy respect for my manager as he was sharp and answered quickly and accurately. I didn't realize that the act of driving is some peasant crap till I met them. I work for a major corporation. One of my colleagues started talking to a director as they were leaving once. They were both walking towards the train station, and she assumed he was also getting a train. As they got there, a limo pulled up and he nonchalantly said, "Bye," and left. My son had a friend in elementary school whose dad was one of the two founders of Capital One. The kid's mum had a secretary for playdates. Dad would fly to London to watch Tottenham. Had a permanent seat. Their London house was next to J.K. Rowling's. You couldn't tell by the way they dressed or their cars, but their vacations were the big difference. The strange thing is that their son loved a mango juice sold maybe 10 to 15 minutes from the house. I always made sure we had some for mine. I send it to him via Amazon occasionally. Hire a private chef for a casual Tuesday lunch with her girlfriends. $2K, just like that. This always seems like one of the better chef gigs to me. Sure, you're never going to be famous for your food, but the ones I know of seem well compensated for the service they provide, and it seems a lot less stressful than restauranting. Also, who doesn't want someone who can cook anything you want at a moment's notice? The real answer is that they have people who handle things. I dated a girl whose family was well off. Dad had sold a company you've heard about for about $600 million. The whole family had a professional assistant called Janice. If someone needed something arranged, text Janice. 7-course catered dinner on Christmas Eve? Text Janice. Prep the semi-private jet for a flight cross-country? Janice will set it up. Need the oil changed in the Chrysler Town and Country minivan? Seriously? Janice will have it done. Need access to the family's private ranch outside of Aspen? You'll work with the caretaker and Janice will coordinate. I got to spend some time with her and she was paid fairly well for her work. My brother is a gazillionaire. I don't know how wealthy he is, but it's a lot of zeros. He owns multiple businesses, which he created from scratch. He treats all of his employees very well. He takes good care of them and their families. They're extremely loyal and have stayed with him for many years. As others have mentioned, he is always on. He's always looking for a new angle. He does business on his cell phone while riding a ski lift. But he does a great job of being in the moment. He can be horsing around with his grandkids and then, in 2 minutes of slack time, checks his email and makes a huge business decision before going back to his grandkids with gusto. He lives in a beautiful home which, while luxurious and well-appointed, is modest by gazillionaire standards. He and his wife are gracious and generous hosts, don't show off their property, but make their guests feel welcome and comfortable. Their guests aren't just fellow gazillionaires, but cover the entire socio-economic spectrum. He doesn't flaunt his wealth. He has an expensive hobby, and he takes his family on expensive vacations, but he doesn't make a big deal of either one. Plus, he invites his brothers on ski trips and such, and all we have to do is show up and have a good time with him. The best thing is he's a silent philanthropist. He very quietly gives away buckets of money. He doesn't brag about it, he just does it. It goes to scout troops, churches, schools, international foundations, single mothers, and the list goes on. I've only found out about his giving indirectly, never from him. If anyone ever deserved their wealth, it was him. He knows how to make money, save it, spend it, and give it away. One old money-rich person treated me to a fancy meal and she was super polite and nice and tipped well. What struck me was the decisiveness and confidence that everyone there would cater to her, and they did. She wanted X dish that they didn't make that day, and they made it. The one that sticks out with me was at the end she said, "I want a cappuccino with some fancy topping I've never heard of, and I want them to put a design on it." Like, I've got cute cappuccinos in my life. It doesn't even cost extra, it just never occurred for me to just ask for everything I want all the time. This was the same person that on a business trip hugged me after the flight and said, "I did it." "Oh, is this your first time in economy?" And she goes, "No, it's my first time flying commercial." Just so we all understand how rich she was. The expectation that someone else will always cater to you is spot on. I worked at a really fancy hotel within walking distance of an Ivy League university, and the super wealthy people just expect certain things. Most people around them who aren't their friends or family are considered the help, even if they don't say it out loud. They also feel pretty entitled to things, like they'll just walk up behind the bar and grab a bottle of wine that they want. Have no fear when addressing anyone, no social barriers. My friend was a pilot for a very large aluminium business in America, so think aluminum foil. The brothers would fly for business meetings and my friend would make all the arrangements, including car rentals. These guys would drive off and go to their meetings and dinners. Sometimes they'd just leave the rental car behind and ride with others to change venues or whatever. He tried to tell them the rental doesn't stop unless the car gets returned, and they didn't really care. If it was any level of inconvenience, they just moved on. It was more than once he had to go back and find a car based on their recollection and get it returned. I was working on securing a large gift for a hospital with naming rights for a very generous donor and commented on his beautiful Patek Philippe watch. He took it off and gave it to me. I couldn't accept it, despite the watch being worth far more than my annual salary, a few years over. Later, when I changed jobs, he took me out for lunch with my former boss and presented the same watch to me. Far too generous a gift, but he liked me. I was born to working-class parents who made it to the upper middle class and put me in old New England prep schools, so I grew up around a lot of super rich people despite not being one myself. There were exceptions, but generally, the old money families were pretty humble and unassuming. One of my closest friends, for example, grew up in a legit mansion, like 15,000 square feet in the primary residence. He had several other houses in various states and countries, a yacht, just endless money, and yet he still grew up wearing hand-me-downs from his older brothers and family friends. These families had the mindset that, we have endless pits of money, so we'll buy whatever we want. Alongside, it's silly to spend money for the sake of spending money because we don't need to prove ourselves to anyone. As a result, you would end up with these weird inconsistencies. Like this kid is at my house talking about how his mum just bought a second set of horse stables, so she has a place for her horses at her favorite vacation house, while my mum, who grew up in the projects, is wondering why his jacket has a tear with duct tape covering it. They spend money for pleasure, utility, and convenience, not for status or superficial reasons. In comparison, the first or second generation money families tended to be concerned with keeping up appearances and buying fashionable things. Again, there were exceptions, but this was definitely the trend. My aunt and uncle are self-made multimillionaires. If you meet them, you'd think that they're well off, but nothing spectacular. In general, they're both very frugal. However, the two areas where they completely detach from ordinary life are 1. Vet bills for their animals. The example that most stands out in my mind was their last dog. He needed dialysis and no vet where we live could provide it. So they did their research and discovered that the best treatment in the country was available in London. A flat in Kew, I think somewhere fairly central anywhere, was rented for the 6 months the dog would need treatment for, and my uncle would stay in it for 1 week a month while the dog had his treatment, then travel back home for the other 3 weeks. And then there was legal help. Neighbors being pains in the backside, they'd send in the solicitor. Trying to organize a purchase for sale and it's taking too long? Pay the solicitor to fast-track it. Local council leaving traffic lights up for over a week after work has been completed? Cry havoc and let slip the solicitors of war. That second one, though. Honestly, I think it seems kind of like a beautiful dream if you really do have terrible neighbors and you want to expedite the shutting of pie holes and quietening of music. But I think most people this litigious could absolutely abuse their fabulous wealth and make people's lives miserable. Here are my experiences. First, the CEO of a large company didn't come from huge wealth, so fairly self-made. As others said, he was a literal workaholic, 24/7, 365 days a year. Zero boundaries between work and personal, and expected the same of his direct reports, unfortunately. Endless energy, perfectionist. Also, his wife was a total witch and his adult kids hated him. The other one was a billionaire who'd inherited his wealth. Was on his ranch in the West, and this cowpoke guy went with us on a horseback ride. He also cooked breakfasts. I literally thought he was a hired hand. Ends up, he was the owner of the ranch. Was kind, friendly, could rope a steer like a true hired hand, and make some mean breakfast tacos. Of course, he flew to the ranch on his private jet while we got there dragging butt in economy class with 12-hour delays. I worked for a billionaire for a whole year. At first it was great because he made us feel like he was in the trenches with us. I came to find out that he made fun of us 8 employees for the salary he was paying us and tended to throw people under the bus. It was one of the very few jobs that I gave less than 2 weeks' notice on and never looked back. I'm so glad to be out of there. Oh man, I felt that. I worked for a multimillionaire. He owned and operated a small business, 12 people including himself. That guy was two-faced. He came off as very charismatic and a wholesome story of someone who was born with nothing and became successful all on his own. After a while working, I saw that guy was a sociopathic monster. He was completely out of touch and didn't care about anything except profit. The only job I quit without notice. Turnover was atrocious, the company was already understaffed, and I decided they could look for my replacement along with the other employees who were smart enough to walk at the same time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. They view life through the lens of time over essentially anything else. Time is their most valuable resource, and anything that saves them time or unnecessary effort is worth whatever the price. I nannied for millionaires. It was new money, and they'd both grown up fairly blue-collar. They were very down-to-earth, giving, and kind. Their children, however, had no rules, no structure, or expectations inside of the house. Their previous nanny gave them whatever they wanted. That changed when I stepped in. I firmly believe kids need to know how to clean a bathroom, wash dishes, sweep a floor, and clean their rooms. It took about a year to get to that point, but I can rest easy knowing they're both currently in college and know how to clean a toilet. The way they get cash. Grew up in a very wealthy family who, though they had credit cards, never chose to use them. They also never had a debit card because they weren't really a thing in the 70s and 80s. My dad used cash almost exclusively. Our family offices were in a bank's high-rise, and once a month my dad would get cash delivered up to his office from the bank by a security guard. It would come in a sealed clear plastic envelope with a sheet of paper certifying the amount delivered. If he was making a big purchase like a car, he'd get that amount rounded up to the nearest 1,000, and if I was lucky enough to be in the office at the time, I'd get $100 for peeling off the excess cash from the stack. If we were traveling, it wasn't uncommon for him to request a couple of $100,000 at a time. This would also come sealed in a clear bag, but the bank would send an assistant with a counting machine to verify the amount in front of our bookkeeper. My dad died before the 90s, and I never once saw him step into a bank lobby or a bank drive-thru. In his business, he also got dozens of random amount checks every month, which would go into a file and be sent to his personal banker to be deposited. Our business could also get loans with just a phone call. I remember my grandfather telling our banker to arrange a multi-million-dollar loan in the early 80s for some radio stations he was buying, and our banker's reaction was just a simple nod. I directly worked for 3 before. They were always busy. They value their time a lot. One of them is a celebrity. The other 2, who were former Wall Street bankers, were doing business trips from one country to another so frequently it was as if they were just commuting from one local city to another. This was pre-pandemic. I do consulting for public companies and worked directly with CEOs and board members. So they're all multi-millionaires, but only a couple in the 3 comma club. First, there's no demarcation between personal and professional time. We should set up a call, meaning vaguely next week, and they'll respond with, "I am free at 10 a.m. on Sunday while I'm at my kid's ski lesson." And second, they ask a million questions, about every detail. This is the #1 personality trait I've noticed. The critical thinking is to the point where if you misspeak one word that's easily well understood, they will question you to be certain. I think this is one of many factors that has made them so successful. I worked for a self-made billionaire. His father was a tradesman without the means to support his post-high school education. He was able to attend a prestigious university on a hockey scholarship. He graduated at the top of his class, later attaining his MBA from Harvard Business School, served in World War II, passed his CPA exam, and went on to earn a law degree from Loyola. He founded a law firm and taught at law school in the mornings and evenings for 25 years. He established a multifaceted business, insurance, food and beverage distribution, and car dealerships, with 40 wholly owned subsidiaries. Each year he'd attend dozens of industry conventions and trade shows, often as the keynote speaker. While not speaking or transacting business, he'd traipse the aisles of vendors. His obsession and hobby was to visit the various booths, scooping up bag after bag of free stationery, pens, pencils, pads, stuff like that. Returning to the office after these excursions, he'd proudly hand several bags of booty to his administrative assistant and tell him or her that those were to be used to supplement his various companies' office supplies. He couldn't understand why these things were being given away for free. During his life, he donated millions upon millions of dollars, the greater part of his wealth, to charity, children's hospitals, and institutions of higher learning. One of the most genuine and kindest people I've ever met, but my God, that's stationary. Doesn't drive? Has a driver, and he doesn't sit in the back of a Rolls or limo. He has a frickin' Mercedes van with tinted windows. There's a PlayStation 5, bar, couch, small writing desk, and even a frickin' painting hanging in there. I haven't ever seen him wear a suit. Cargo shorts, Swatch watch, wedding ring, and old running shoes. Shops online and buys like pretty cheap stuff and compares prices. Orders food online but compares restaurant prices and value for money. Doesn't have a jet but flies first class everywhere. Doesn't have a yacht but rents staffed yachts. If he does drive, it's a Mini Cooper. He's had the same Android phone for a few years. Goes to mid-level bars and restaurants, nothing exclusive. Yeah, I'd imagine that old habits die hard if you come from less wealthy backgrounds and get lucky enough to make it big. That Mercedes mobile office sounds wild, though. I've worked in 2 companies that went from nothing to 2 billion sales in 20 years. The founders were all engineers and still worked alongside us. My favorite one used to ask permission to sit at my lunch table. He's easily the greatest human being I've ever known. You'd never know the kind of money he had if you saw him. He still drove the car he restored himself in college. He'd drive across town to save 5 cents a gallon on gas. Just from his public stock trades, we knew he had hundreds of millions, though this was in the 90s. I still talk to him. I emailed him last week. Honestly, all of the founders have been something like him, although he was the greatest one. The others did spend their money, though, sometimes extravagantly. One, for example, had married a history major and had the hobby of relocating historic buildings to his property. His house had museum-quality antiques, such as George Washington's dinner table, and he actually used them. I guess by the strictest definition, I'm a multimillionaire, as the first digit of my Fidelity account does go to 2 sometimes. As a nearly 50-year-old engineer, that's not unusual, though. Millionaires aren't what they used to be. I've had the opportunity to meet a famous billionaire a handful of times and just get a glimpse into what his life is like. It's absolutely unfathomable. The thing that stands out to me is the literal army of people that he has working for him. Never mind the fact that he owns a company with thousands of employees, he has likely hundreds of staff that have full-time jobs dedicated to various aspects of his personal life. He has the regular housekeeping staff to manage his multiple properties, pilots, chefs, personal assistants and stuff that any billionaire Joe has, but here are some crazy examples of the people he has. He likes cars, like a lot. He has a salaried, full-time car restoration expert with a team of engineers and technicians working under that guy. He has an art collection of untold vastness with a full-time curator and sourcing experts. He was tired of the restaurant scene in his hometown, so he created his own restaurant and now has a whole chain of them around the globe. He sources the beef for his restaurants from his own 1,500-acre ranch. Literally anything in the world this man wants, he has people already working for him who'll make it so. It boggles my mind whenever I think about it. The pure cost of all those things, and he'll never even make a dent in his net worth. I work with millionaires and a few billionaires. Most of them work non-stop. There's no boundary between workday, holiday, and weekend. But there's also no boundary between friend, family, and coworker a lot of times. It's easy to forget the cost of things when money is meaningless. When a $500,000 Ferrari is the financial equivalent to a gallon of milk for most families, then spending 20 grand on a party that includes private chefs and a bar staff is nothing. What happened recently was that someone mentioned there were a bunch of kids in my school who were getting trained at trade schools for jobs. But the certification exam was $350, so only 2 kids out of the 35 in our pilot program got certified. It was hard for anyone in that room to understand how these families couldn't come up with the $350 if they had the whole year to prepare. Most people in that room bill at $250 to $500 an hour if they work at all. 2 days ago, someone took me out to lunch and the bill was $250. But since it's Christmas season and the waitress was really great, he tipped $250. A different time we went out for drinks, and the bartender was one of those, tell me what you like and I'll make you something, people. The lady goes to pay and just writes math in the tip line and put $500 on the total for what was less than 3 drinks a person for 4 of us. On the other hand, there are lots of times when someone says something completely off the wall, elitist. I grew up incredibly poor, and some of these people are 5th and 10th generation wealth. They grew up with maids and butlers and private planes, and their great-grandparents have buildings all over the US named after them. One time, one of them was talking about how she went to Walmart to people watch and never felt unsafe even though it was in the black part of town. Her words. She tried to, quote, make some black friends because if she could befriend them, then she could educate them on better financial decisions. It was such a condescending and racist approach, we had to counsel her to never do that again. Another guy says things like, oh, the blacks will do X, and he thinks he's very woke. Aside from all that, there's a general loss of touch with what everyday people face. One of my friends is going to be a billionaire soon. His father is dying, and he's the sole heir to the family fortune. He already had access to it, but he chooses to live a middle-class life instead. It's important to him to teach his kids the value of hard work. So he's basically the exception. I worked as a nanny to an ultra-rich family, and they were one of the nicest people I've met, and treated everyone super kind. I was thankful they're not the almond type of mum with the extra gentle parenting. They wanted me to discipline their kids, and these kids had never had an iPad when I was with them for the 4 years as well. Some of the most well-behaved kids I've worked with. The parents were extra thankful and appreciative. Made me feel welcome and part of the family. What industry is way more shifty than people realize? Trucking. The margins are razor thin, and so everyone is trying to nickel and dime each other constantly. The drivers lie to their dispatchers, the dispatchers lie to the brokers lie to the clients. All of this for like $50 to $100 sometimes. Some will give their drivers time limits that they can't make without speeding, but make speeding tickets the driver's responsibility. And I've also heard on the internet that some install governors that prevent you from going over a certain speed limit. Then there's the laws on how long you can drive and how long a break you need to take before driving again. Those often don't get followed. Dietary supplements. It's gotten better, but there's still a lot of half-truths and whole lies. Not all that long ago, it was seriously like the wild, wild west. Dentistry, particularly dental chains like Aspen Dental, Bright Now, Affordable Dentures, Coast, among others. When I worked for Aspen, every office had to meet its financial goal at the end of the month. Oftentimes, this meant exaggerating a patient's treatment plan and scaring them into unnecessary, expensive surgeries, like a 15-year-old getting a full mouth extraction and put into dentures. My comment is based on my experiences in corporate dentistry, especially Aspen. There are plenty of excellent dentists who work at these chains, you just have to find them. My issue is mostly with the business model and the high-pressure salespeople with no medical backgrounds whatsoever. Just do your research, ask questions, get everything in writing, and be proactive. If you do these things, you'll be fine. I don't want my comment to scare anyone away from going to the dentist, which is an important thing to do. I once worked for a dentist who told us that everyone who walked in the doors has gum disease. Everyone. And the assistants would compete to see who could get the most people to agree to an oral cancer screening. Are you 25 years old and never smoked a cigarette or drunk alcohol? Great! You absolutely need an oral cancer screening because Shannon really wants that Starbucks gift card. Shady billing and insurance claims, straight-up fraud, charges tacked onto bills that weren't discussed, like a $150 electric toothbrush that you never agreed to purchasing. I ran far away from that place and never looked back. I interviewed for Affordable and got an offer, but it's the same racket. God, you'd think that the one person you want not to be shady is the person sticking sharp metal implements in your mouth and then pausing to quote you exactly how much it's all going to cost when they see the problem. We're all one checkup away from being taken hostage and held at knife or dental point tip for our money. The tattoo industry isn't necessarily shady, but there are some major gaps between good artists and crappy ones. I've worked with straight-up smackheads who I wouldn't let draw on me in marker. Yet year after year they find work in shops. Always check the portfolio and talk to the artist, and if they seem sketchy or disinterested, you nope the frick right out of there. Even the portfolio might not be a good indicator. I went to what I thought was a reputable shop, pre-Yelp and Google reviews. It was recommended by my ex, who had some gorgeous work on her. I was new to the area, and he had great work, so I went with it. Went in, and the guy at the counter set me up with a tattooist. The guy had a great portfolio, and we set up a date for me to come in the following day. It was a smaller piece, pretty simple. Got it done, and it looked great. For about a minute. It took a couple of days, but that thing began to heal and it was a blown-out piece of trash afterwards. I went back to the shop and the guy that set me up with the tattoo guy was there. I showed him and complained and he's like, "Yep, Friday was his last day. We let him go because we've been getting that complaint." So those motherfrickers knew that he was bad and didn't care and put me into an appointment without him knowing it was his last day. That's the one tattoo I've kind of regretted. The credit card industry. There's a whole high-risk segment of the industry dedicated to preying on young people, old people, or people with bad financial histories and issuing them cards at extremely high interest rates. If you have a crappy credit score, be wary of any credit card offers you get. I read that the supplement industry lobbied hard in the 90s to make sure that Congress didn't pass an act which would require the FDA to actually look into whether a supplement is safe, effective, or reliable. They even showed ads on TV using the whole government overreach angle. Unfortunately, the law was never passed. So now the supplement industry can just churn out crap that improves heart health or helps memory, and don't have to have those statements undergo any kind of verification. One of the individuals who wanted to pass regulation for the supplement industry also dealt with the tobacco industry and was quoted saying something along the lines of, "The tobacco industry was a piece of cake next to the supplement industry." Marketing and advertising. We can track and buy so much data on people to directly place specific ads. I can track the locations of cell phones and send ads based on the places you've physically been, even if it isn't directly related to my business. This may seem fairly obvious, but the entire real estate industry is awash in overseas and laundered money in the United States, to the point that several markets would totally crash without these buyers. Everyone knows, and no one cares. Olive oil. The amount of counterfeit olive oil is insanely higher than you think. You have a higher chance of buying olive oil that's been cut than buying real olive oil. Education. People are constantly trying to find ways to line their pockets instead of focusing on the students. And I say this while working for what I consider to be one of the better school districts in my state. Funerals and caskets. Nothing like preying on grieving survivors to try and sell them the most glorious, satin-lined mahogany box to plant their loved one in the ground. As a quick PSA for those of you who want to donate your body, my family has been using medcure.org for full body or non-transplant donations. Usable organs and tissues go to hospitals and research facilities. Anything remaining is cremated and the ashes are either distributed at sea or returned to the family. All of this at no cost to the donor. $0. My mum's cremation, documentation, and return of ashes alone cost us over $2,000. As a child of depression and lifelong penny pincher, she would have been frickin' furious about that. My brother and dad had registered with Medcure, so for them, we got 0 cremation expenses, no stress about what to do immediately following their death. We were much happier to spend money on the memorial event. If you're not bound by spiritual or cultural death rituals, or prefer a frugal lifestyle, or want to benefit scientific research, look into non-transplant full-body donation. And I guess thanks to the honorable funeral industry folks who aren't gouging folks for every last penny. People who go in for a traditional burial method will almost certainly appreciate what you do. Listen, future family of the narrator, I don't care what you do with my handsome rotting corpse after I've vacated my own cranium. Do whatever's cheapest for you, or preferably whatever lets you get a bit more money to take care of yourself after I'm gone. Sold to a group of corpse bride reenactment perverts? Sure. Black market organ dealers? Great! Just make sure the price is right. It does not matter to me at all. The fashion industry. They rely on third world factories to make their products and pay them a pittance. Then they sell their products on for 10 times the price they pay the salary for their staff and factory workers. Then they burn, yes, literally burn clothing that doesn't sell because they don't want luxury items flooding the market and therefore lowering its value. There was a really good documentary I caught on Netflix called The True Cost About the Fashion Industry, specifically the low-cost throwaway fashion culture that exists in most first-world countries today. It was really eye-opening to say the least. I never sat down and considered the significant environmental implications of the clothes we buy, and it definitely got me thinking more about my personal consumer habits. There's a reason why you can get those cool, nerdy screen print t-shirts for about $7, and those reasons are scary. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Knowledge of this isn't nearly as common as it should be. Mobile video games are literally designed to be frustrating instead of fun. There was a South Park episode about this not too terribly long ago, which I found to be incredibly accurate. Sadly, it didn't make quite the same splash that I'd hoped it would, given that quite a few people still aren't aware of what's going on. See, a great many mobile titles make use of mechanics that are put together with the intention of nurturing habitual behavior, frustrating a user, and then offering a slightly more enjoyable experience after money has been spent. The monetization model is created first, and then the game elements are built around it. This tactic has proven to be a more profitable model than actually offering entertainment, to the point where some companies take very careful steps to ensure that their games don't accidentally end up being fun. That sounds like satire, I know, but it's actually true. As an example, EA released a mobile Sims game and holy crap, it was bad. The game was fun to play, but the only hang-up was that everything your sim did took real-life hours to do. Meaning, if I wanted to do a certain mission that required me to, say, send my sim to work, I would literally send him to work and wait 8 real-life hours for him to come back. But you could speed it up using real money. The breaking point was when they had special events that allowed me to get an exclusive accessory from my town that I really wanted. I started doing the missions required to get it, and right when I had one mission left, I ran out of time. The event ended. No frickin' joke, you had to devote all of your free time to this crappy frickin' game to get your reward, and if you so much as went an hour without making your sim do the next task, you were screwed unless you coughed up $5 to make Bob the Sim take a crap. I deleted the game and never looked back. That kind of formula doesn't work for any game, and I don't want to have to wait several real hours to do something in the game. I want to play the frickin' game and not be cut off right when the action begins. Imagine playing the new Red Dead Redemption, except right in the middle of the shootout, the game cuts you off and says, "You must wait 5 hours to continue, or give us your actual hard-earned money so you can play the game. Otherwise, catch you later then." Frick that. I'd rather slap $60 on the checkout counter and just get the full game so that I can play it on my own time. The rest of this Am I the Genius video will automatically unlock in 33 minutes and 3 seconds. Spend 89 YouTube bucks to speed up? I mean, to be fair, you have to wait what feels like 5 hours to do a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm on my second playthrough of that game, and I'm still not sure whether the whole real-life simulator aspect of the game is a strength or just really annoying. But yes, to return to the main point, mobile games have been cheap, nasty scams ever since they just cut away from the model where all they did was show you ads. Collections. Yes, I know most people assume they're shady, but I don't think most people know just how shady. There are clear laws in the US defining what a collections agency can and can't do, how often they can contact you, what sort of pressure they can apply, what they can threaten you with, among other things. These laws are not ambiguous, they leave little or no wiggle room, and yet low-rent agencies violate them all the time. They'll buy debt for pennies on the dollar that's past the statute of limitations, meaning it's not legal to collect on it, and then start calling the debtor and harassing them for payment. They'll call debtors and threaten them with legal action, tell them that a process server is on the way to their house, that the IRS is going to audit them, that their wages will be garnished and assets seized. All blatant lies meant to scare the person into paying up. And I'm not talking about scammers from India here. I'm talking about legally registered collection agencies right here in the US. So how do they get away with this? Because the vast majority of people don't know their rights. They're already dealing with the stress and shame of being deep in debt with no way to pay it off. So if someone who sounds authoritative calls them up and lists all of the terrible things that are going to happen, they just assume that's correct. And the few times that someone knows enough to fight back, the worst that happens is that the collection agency pays a fine of a few $1,000s. That's usually covered by their liability insurance, and even if it isn't, it's just the cost of doing business. Small price to pay for the cash they're raking in. And if they really get slammed, they can just close up shop and reopen under a different name. It's a really sleazy business with a lot of bad actors. I don't know about most people, but the home security industry is pretty shady. Shades. No, really. Most of the branded ones are owned by a single company called Luxottica. It's a monopoly. Worse, they own a crap ton of prescription frames as well. Imagine if you needed a wheelchair, but the only people who made wheelchairs were Ferrari and they started at 40 grand. Specifically in the US and sporadically in other countries, academia. Yes, it does function like an industry, again specifically in the US, and it can get really, really damn shady. Public research-oriented universities are mostly above board, but the further you drift away from that, the shadier it gets. Diploma mills are a well-known phenomenon, but there are also plenty of legitimate or semi-legitimate establishments offering continuing education or distance education diplomas that are both expensive and not really worth the paper they're written on. Labor relations at most universities, including reputable ones, are okay, but becoming increasingly messed up. Part-time, dead-end teaching contracts are increasingly popular, and their conditions for the employee range from crappy to Dickensian. The US agriculture industry. It's illegal to record videos or take pictures in slaughterhouses, yet in the UK, it's required by law. Car sales. I install computers at car dealerships. The salespeople don't pay attention to me while I work because I'm not a customer. I overhear them talking so much crap about all their customers to the point where it's sad. It seems like they're always trying to rip people off. Blood donation centers are shady as frick. The source? A guy who's a former branch manager here. One Blood and other blood buses are super shady. Employees are trained that every donor is a hero and that they're saving local lives. Horse crap. The blood is sold overseas to weird companies. The pint of blood a donor donated is worth several $100s depending on the day. The donor gets a t-shirt that we printed by the millions for pennies on the dollar. Blood centers make mega money, lie to donors, and treat employees like animals. Yikes! I wonder if this is better monitored in other countries outside the United States, because the narrator knows a lot of people who give blood. Here's hoping. You won't believe how shady the clickbait industry is. Okay, before I actually get into this topic, I need to clarify a couple of things. Yes, there's really a clickbait industry, and yes, it's largely distinct from the world of online periodicals. I work for an outlet that straddles the line between the two, meaning that we actually create and publish real and original content, but we occasionally have to employ some less than desirable tactics in order to stay afloat. Said tactics include allowing questionable sites and services to advertise on our pages, putting vague but attention-grabbing headlines on fairly mundane pieces, and repurposing older content for use in new articles and videos. Now, let me tell you about the actual clickbait industry. There are sites, thousands upon thousands of them in fact, which work as kind of redirect networks, for a lack of a better term. You've probably stumbled into one of them in the past. Something mildly interesting shows up somewhere that you frequent, usually promising a story that seems just slightly shocking at first glance. If you click on the link, you're brought to a page that features dozens of these stories, each of which is accompanied by a thumbnail that not so subtly hints at something more intriguing. Clicking again will bring you into another such index, and then another, until sometimes, if you're very lucky, you'll be brought to a legitimate site which has unwittingly paid to advertise via the wrong channels. More often than not, though, your final destination will be a poorly written, single-paragraph description of a photograph that was purchased from a paparazzi website, which is once again saturated in ads. Okay, so what's the big deal, you might be asking? They're just pulling revenue out of stupid people. That's true, and that's one of their primary goals, but it isn't the only one. See, each of those clicks gathers a little bit of information, all of which is assembled into a kind of profile. Said profile is then used to target specific articles and ads at the people making their way through this online labyrinth, dangling tailored bait in front of their noses. Depending on the network, that bait may include political propaganda, misinformation, and even outright scams, with what a visitor sees being largely determined by what they've already said in what they want with their choices thus far. Here's an example. A person visits a website and they see a story about a young female celebrity having a malfunctioning wardrobe. They click the link, which brings them to a site that resembles an adult thumbnail page from the early 2000s, albeit featuring celebrity gossip, technology news, and a host of other topics. The promised article about the famous exposed chest is included somewhere on the second or third line, in between one about a real-life lightsaber and one about an anti-aging technique. Our hapless visitor, having decided that the lightsaber sounds more interesting, clicks on that link and gets brought to still another thumbnail page. This continues for another jump or two, and at the end, the algorithm behind the site knows that it's dealing with a male in his early to mid-20s who lives alone and prefers dogs over cats. The further down you go, the more insidious it gets, and if our wayward internet wanderer then goes back to the original site where this all started, he'll see a new advertisement waiting, this one having been tailored specially for him. You might think that you're immune to this sort of thing. Maybe you assume that your ad blocker protects you, or maybe you're just too shrewd to fall down the rabbit hole. Still though, doesn't that lightsaber-induced wardrobe malfunction sound like something you should see? In short, the clickbait industry is even shadier than you think. Click the link in the above comment to find out how. Car dealerships are the worst. In a lot of places in the States, you can't order directly from the factories and legally have to buy through a dealership, and the dealerships will take a big cut of that. Also, in my state, the big car dealerships successfully lobbied to make buying a car illegal on Sunday, and although I can't remember how it worked, the unofficial reason for it was because it would hurt smaller dealerships. Thankfully, I think most people realize they're pretty shady. The construction industry. You'd be amazed how much contractors try to cut corners and do shady crap to save on money. You know that joke about people standing around watching others work? Yeah, they're actually working too, specifically making sure the guys doing the construction aren't cheating. In a world without construction regulation and enforcement, your house gets a big frickin' crack in it due to crappy soil work, and now you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that fixed. What is the big secret of your hometown? I don't know if it's considered an especially dark secret, but in the county I lived in from the ages of 10 through 18, we had a soldier die under some extremely questionable circumstances. They said he was inebriated or experiencing some kind of mental distress and raided a plant nursery. They claimed he was attacked by wasps and ran. He called 911 several times and claimed that someone was chasing him and was trying to kidnap him. In the last call to the emergency services, he said everything was fine suddenly. Just 14 or 15 minutes later, he was struck by a woman who stopped and called 911. He was run over 2 more times and then died. The autopsy showed no signs of bee or wasp stings. The connection to the nursery is due to the fact that it was just up the road from where he died. The place was ransacked, pizza eaten, and money taken, but his wallet and phone were sitting on the counter undisturbed. However, the family was not okay with that explanation, especially because he had previously texted that there were some problems with the local boys, since the soldier wasn't from this part of the state. So the family had a private investigator look into it. They analyzed the 911 recordings and found several instances of other people talking in the background, though most of it couldn't be made out. Except one. In the 911 call where he told the operator that everything was fine, a male voice could be heard saying, "Tell her." And the nursery? There was no DNA, no fingerprints, no footprints that led back to the soldier, even though his phone and wallet were there in the building. A lot of people, his family included, think he was killed by some of the local guys there after he got into a fight about something. They chased him down and caught him. He was able to run again after the final 911 call and was hit by a driver while trying to get help. And the police in the county covered the entire thing up because the boys involved were connected to the department somehow. Of the 3 drivers, none were charged for hitting or running him over. I think only the first driver even stopped, but it was discovered that one of the drivers was connected to the department either through family or friendship. It's a crazy story, but you can look it up. Just search Austin McGough. I wouldn't be too surprised since there's a lot of shady crap happening in small-town police departments, including covering up unspeakable act offenses that officers commit. I really hope his family gets him justice. Yep, being a figure with that amount of power in a small isolated town is a real recipe for corruption and unassailable authority figures. There are very few checks and balances out in the middle of butt-frick nowhere. A freshman who was also on the spectrum was known to have a really rough life with his family at home. He was a problem child and got in trouble on purpose, but no one punished him too harshly because of his home life. He was a well-loved kid at school and in the community, actually. One day, just before the holiday break in December, he was really ill, but his mum sent him to school anyway. She locked him out of the house. He decided to try and get into one of the empty houses down the street through the chimney. Now, this kid was the size of a second grader, but he was too big to fit through since chimneys taper down thinner. Mum never answered her phone when the school reported him missing, went a whole day without reporting her kid, and no one knew what happened to him. It was about a month and a half before we knew what actually went down. We all thought he ran away, was alive somewhere, or maybe went to his sister's house. Nope, dead in a chimney. The school organized an entire week of counseling and such. They wore pink for a day and handed out little pink ribbons on pins for him, since his favorite color was pink. Everyone was hit really hard by it. That's how our small town started 2020. It hasn't got any better, as you can see, so it's weird that it's been almost a year now. We had a crazy rich guy from the 16 or 1700s who saw people robbing a grave one night and decided that when he died, he'd be laid to rest in the roof of a barn behind his house. He believed he'd only be dead for 30 years or so and requested that they lock the barn and put the key in his coffin so that he could get out but no one could get back in. He requested that whoever inherited his house, fortune and belongings would have to give them back when he resurrected. He did actually get his wish, but of course he was never resurrected. People stole his bones and his house is a dentist now. This is also the town where that lady went viral going ham in the alcohol aisle in Aldi in 2020. This is more comical than dark. A house burned down in the small town of 600, one block from the fire station. It being a volunteer fire department, nobody was actually at the station. They tried to get the pumper truck out, but one of the volunteers had run it into a brick building the week before, and it was still at the shop. We're still undecided whether the house owner burned it down for the insurance. The strange thing was, there was nothing valuable inside. 15 years ago, the local district attorney called his longtime girlfriend and told her he was taking the day off from work and that he loved her. He parked his car in town and went for a stroll past the local shops. He hasn't been seen since. His car was found where he had parked it the next day. He had left his cell phone in the car, but his keys and wallet were missing. Later that year, his laptop, sans its hard drive, was found under a bridge at a nearby river. The hard drive was eventually discovered by a local woman walking along the bank of the river, but it was too damaged to recover any data from it. Interestingly, investigators discovered that someone had done a search on his home computer for how to wreck a hard drive. Did he jump from a local bridge? Did he encounter someone who had prosecuted who did him harm? Or did he escape his life to start a new one? About 10 years ago, a lot of homeless people disappeared, and when the police did the investigation, they found out a guy was kidnapping and eating those people. Police found his hideout and found a half-eaten body and bones from another person. People don't like to talk about it, but everyone knows what happened. Ooh, I have a doozy. Short version, popular kid in high school runs a secret towel fight club and accidentally kills one of their friends in the house of a local politician, who then proceeds to bury the story. Towel fight club is like taping towels over your hands and beating each other up. It's supposed to just be boxing, but it sounds like they got out of control and hardly could call it that. Oh, this is a sad one to me. There was an older couple here who ran a halfway house for troubled kids, who'd recently gotten out of juvie. They fostered a few as well. They were loved in the community, wonderful people. One of the kids had an older brother who was a gang member in the nearest big city. During a visit, he snuck his 15-year-old younger brother a piece. The younger bro ended up holding up a local gas station and killed 3 people. One of them was my friend's cousin. The foster parents lost whatever credentials they needed to do what they did. The kids went back into the foster system, and the giant house has been abandoned since 2009. There's a half-submerged submarine from the war in the bay where I live. You can walk out to it when the tide is out. In the late 80s, someone cut open the hatch, one of the only visible parts left sticking out of the sand, then climbed in and was having a look around. The tide came in, and he drowned. If I remember correctly, the whole hatch was filled with cement and then welded shut to stop it happening again. I mean, right up until I read about what happened to the guy, the narrator was just thinking about how cool it would be to go inside a submarine ruin like that. So yeah, I'd probably have drowned too. Sympathize. The town I was raised in wasn't exactly small, but here's the one dark secret I know. My hometown was where lots and lots of sports players had their mansions. And so, of course, their wives and children were out and about in the community a lot. Every single sports player wife in that town was or is heavily addicted to opioids. Every single one. That addiction is obviously an epidemic all over the country, but among the rich wives in that town, it had a 100% infection rate, so to speak. I know because one of my friend's mums was the hairdresser for basically every single one of those wives. I was homeless my senior year of high school, and one of the sports players' wives heard about me from her, and she gifted me an iPhone. That phone was pennies to her, but I still wish I'd expressed my thanks more, because that wife died from taking too much of that particular substance not long after. Sorry if that isn't much of a dark secret, but yeah. Our local pizza place was a known clan hub. Everyone knew it, and still to this day, if you Google the town's name and the initials of the clan, the first thing that pops up is this pizza shop. They had some really gross pizza, too. Back in the 80s, a couple were driving a motorcycle when they were stopped by 3 men, who then committed the unspeakable act on the woman while forcing her husband to watch. Then they unalived both of them, except the woman played dead after they killed her husband, ran and told the police. The police caught the gang not so long after. That same night that they were caught, a mob of 2,000 people gathered in front of the police department, broke in and told the sheriff, "You guys did an excellent job, now leave it to us." The mob broke the cell where the 3 men were, beat them up and attached them alive into cars and dragged them for 4 miles to a park in the middle of the city where they set them on fire, still alive, while everyone was clapping and cheering. Almost nobody talks about it now, but there's even a video of it. The mayor of the town that I live just outside of was murdered by his girlfriend a while back, and there was a realtor that was using his company as a front for smuggling smack. Other than that, it's the usual small-town southern crap. When I was growing up, my small town had a spate of murders, about 6 in as many months. This was in the 70s, nothing like it before or after. We have a vineyard hill next to our village. On that hill, there's a big wooden cross. Lots of people go there to drink, have a walk or with their dogs, but no one else knows why the cross is there. During the war, a vineyard keeper lived there with his son. His son was recruited and the man was left alone. When the war ended, his son survived and wanted to prank his dad by sneaking up on him at night. But the vineyard keeper saw him and thought he was a robber, so he grabbed his rifle and shot the robber. When he found out it was his son, it broke his heart. He dug a grave on top of the hill for his son and erected a big wooden cross next to the grave. When he was done, he laid next to his son and used the same weapon to end things himself. From that day, no one worked on the vineyards, and there's a big wooden cross on top of the hill. Now you can't even recognize that there's a grave there. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Some high school football players shoved broomsticks up freshman players' butts in the locker rooms after a practice. The coach found out and did nothing about it. The whole town knew, and nothing happened to anyone in the form of punishment. Every game for the rest of the year, the opposing team's fans brought broomsticks to the games. About 40% of my hometown was homeless. No one had jobs, no one could afford any kind of housing situation. Neighbors paid for heat where they could on houses that people were squatting in, and everyone invited everyone else over for dinner every night. We didn't know who was homeless, we just did it. We hired anyone and everyone for odd jobs. A lot of people just lived as they would when they were kids. Keep the fireplace going with the trees you chopped down, gather water by the well and trade, farm, or trap for food. I went to school with a lot of homeless kids. We had, looking back, the most robust school breakfast program I've ever heard of. I thought it was normal for over half the school to show up until I moved to the city. You just gave people the dignity they deserved. No one was shamed if they dropped out at grade 10. We all knew that if they needed the job, they should take it. Looking back, I realize how wild it is. Our town was so poor, and no one was treated any different by me and mine, at least. Sure, there were some rich people, but they overwhelmingly went to the other school. And there were no panhandlers, no beggars, nothing like that. I was just told the Buseys were coming over for dinner. Did I like them? No, I kinda think they were jerks. But never did I make them feel uncomfortable, and most just ate, had some tea, and left. And if that doesn't tickle your fancy, a whale washed up on shore one week, and all the guys in the local high school took turns doing the deed with it. All of them. To clarify, the whale part happened after I graduated by a few years. It was a very public thing when it was happening, and no one likes to talk about it since then. I must say that was a really uplifting story of community, solidarity, and a testament to the kindness humanity are capable of when we're in tough situations. Then the last two sentences were the most wild right turn, which is hilarious, but did go some way to unraveling all of the good work done up until that point. As a teen in high school, the health teacher got caught being very inappropriate with a student. Everyone magically passed that year, including me, who skipped almost every day. Then a few years ago in another small town, two different scandals within the space of 5 years. First one, teachers at a preschool were dosing the children with melatonin at nap time, and the second one, a very well-known and respected funeral home, went under investigation for selling body parts. I've got 3. We have a prison for young delinquents in our town. Back in the 80s, a student escaped and broke into an elderly couple's home. He strangled and did the unspeakable act to the wife in front of her wheelchair-bound husband. He then beat up the old man, but I don't know if that guy died or not. Next one, a young woman was running our high school track and a student went outside and shanked her to death using a metal compass. And finally, in the 80s, a son of a New York Police Department detective shanked a mid-20s woman to death in her driveway over 40 times. There was a huge manhunt for the guy. My parents tell me the rumor was that the woman's husband was gay and having an affair with the man. But there's also a rumor that the man unalived his own wife and that the guy was convicted was just an easy target based on his mental capacity and reputation. I actually met the guy over the summer during an investigation I was doing. I'm a private investigator. The guy was definitely strange, but then again he was in prison for 20 years. A girl I went to high school with just vanished one day. From day one, everyone was telling the police that her ex had something to do with it. She already had a restraining order because he held a knife to her and threatened to kidnap her, but with no evidence, they couldn't do anything. Over the years, several people went to the police saying that he'd admitted to killing her, but they did nothing. He eventually got in trouble for threatening to kill another girlfriend and actually attacking her and went to prison for 3 years. After prison, he came back to town and eventually asked another ex of his for a ride home from a party. And then she went missing after that night, and they found her car burned, and they arrested him again and he had burns on his hands. A few months later, someone found a set of remains outside of town, and during the recovery they found another set of much older remains. He killed them both, and the failure of our local police department caused the second girl to be murdered. A new police chief's bachelor party was held at the local adult exotic dance club. It was videoed when video was new. The cops broke in looking for the tape, which was also recorded. The new chief lost the job within a month. There were rumors that there was a secret passage from the village's churchyard to the coal cellar on our grounds, which were used by Jews to hide and flee from the Reich. Not sure if that qualifies as dark. Some guy that owned a froyo shop knocked one of his female employees unconscious and she woke up inside this soundproof room in said yogurt shop, bound up and wearing a diaper. She managed to escape and get the cops called. This one guy, blue collar but running for a local political office, comes home to his wife of 7 years, finds her doing the deed with some guy. He whips out a piece and shoots the guy a few times. The man survives. He finds out that his wife was cheating on him and it wasn't the unspeakable act. Here's where it gets dirty though. So the police want to press charges against him for attempted murder, since they say he knew his wife played around. So the DA comes to him and tells him to stop running for office and withdraw. He does, and the charges magically go away. No crime here, folks. Does anyone remember a few years back when a bunch of people were dying of lung diseases caused by illegal THC vape cartridges? Well, turns out the guy I went to high school with was running one of the biggest THC cartridge operations in the Midwest, if not the entire country. His mum and brother were in on it too and had multiple locations where they were paying people to manufacture, pack, and distribute said cartridges. Maybe not so much dark as wild. When I was in the first grade, a guy called the police from multiple different phones, saying there was an explosive device in each of the schools in the town. 3 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high school. And all of these schools were evacuated. Turns out, while the entire police force was split up, He robbed a bank and got away with it. Don't go getting ideas, listeners. Honestly, I'm just glad that the cops prioritized the safety of the students over the money in the banks. It's refreshing. The bank was probably insured against that kind of thing anyway. Hopefully, nobody got hurt. Looking through my hometown's history is a wild ride. About a decade ago, there was a crime spike here. It was really bad because one cartel tried to displace the other. And because we're a sleepy town across the border from the US, we're prime cartel real estate. However, when they weren't tearing each other up in the streets, they would abduct, interrogate, kill, and dispose of the bodies of their rivals until eventually one cartel managed to keep the town. One thing that baffled the authorities was their stealth. They came out of nowhere, struck their target, and vanished into the shadows. That may be possible for a small unit or even a lone agent, but that's unheard of in a cartel. Federal investigations were made and no one was able to find the cartel's HQ. It had to be big because they had weapons, vehicles, metal shops, dormitories, kitchens, and the corpse disposal equipment. They looked everywhere. Nearby ranches, warehouse, junkyards, nothing. Until, that is, they looked where no one thought to look. A few kilometers outside of here is a fully operational state prison that they were using as their HQ. Everyone was in on it, from the inmates to the guards, to the warden, to the governor. People were killed there, burnt to ashes inside steel drums, and the ashes were thrown in a river a few kilometers away. Over 100 people were disposed of this way. Forensic authorities have combed the river, finding small bone fragments and testing their DNA. As of 2016, 9 have been identified. There is a dispute over the governor responsible. At that time, the governor of the state was Humberto Moreira. However, he resigned before finishing his term so he could run for another office, which he lost. Because he resigned, a provisional governor was assigned named Jorge Torres. During this time, there was an absolute media silence regarding the matter, either because of bureaucratic stonewalling, cartel threats, or government payoffs. However, a national magazine called Proceso wrote an article about the crimes being committed in the state, and Moreira ordered all copies of the magazine removed from newsstands there. When the problems in the state started to surface, both governors left the country. Moreira got a scholarship to study in Spain, which no one was able to identify the source of, and he also lived in a chalet that had a monthly rent higher than his salary as a governor. Meanwhile, Torres fled to the US. Moreira managed to transfer the blame of all wrongdoings of his administration onto Torres. Moreira was arrested by the Interpol a few years back, charged with money laundering. Incredible as it may seem, the Spanish authorities handed him over to Mexico, where he's lived as a free man, going as far as to create his own political party. No charges of any crime have ever been brought on him, and he maintains his claim of innocence. Since his return, he's never left the country. To mock his claim, one senator went so far as to invite him to the Super Bowl, with all expenses paid. Moreira, fearing the Interpol, passed on the invitation. The senator tweeted a picture of the empty seat. Meanwhile, Torres was caught in the US and also faced charges of money laundering. He pleaded guilty in the summer of this year. It's worth noting that Torres' testimony gives details as to the cartel's operations during Moreira's administration, including the protection they received and the times, dates, and sums of bribes paid. The Mexican government never included these statements as part of their investigation. What job do you have that sounds completely made up? This is a job I had in high school and early college years. I was a lifeguard response tester. I'd go to public pools or lakes with a lifeguard. Then I would pretend to drown and see how well they handled the situation. It was fun, except for when they'd fail and I had to walk over telling them, I was drowning for about 10 minutes out there. One woman tried to help me before the lifeguard realized once, and I just had to go with it. She did a mighty fine job. And others would just yell for the lifeguard. I go into a big vault for the Reserve Bank of New Zealand and I burn money. Every day, thousands of banknotes go to phase out the old ones to make way for the new. How's that monitored? Is each note accounted for, and has anyone, or yourself, ever tried to skim a few bucks from the burn pile? Bank of Canada had an interview once where they described and showed the interior. Cameras everywhere. Armed guards everywhere. Checkpoints, searches, x-rays everywhere. The risk versus reward is minimal. The most you might be able to escape with, if you're lucky, is a few bills, and the risk for that is years in prison. They also burn counterfeit bills at the same location. I do lighting for amusement parks. People generally tell me they never realized you could do that for a living. I remind them that someone has planned the lighting for anywhere you go. Speaking of amusement parks, I'm retired from a major theme park. I worked there as a scenic painter, making everything look aged, wood grain, things like that, plus murals. A lot of people don't look at those sort of things when they visit the parks, and many presume that the faux finishes are real. I find and keep track of submarines from an airplane. I attempt to read addresses on mail that machines can't read. The narrator had always wondered what happened to the letters whose addresses were unidentifiable because of his disastrous handwriting. Now we know. Some poor bugger is squinting furiously at the envelope while cursing me and making wild guesses. Follow-on comment? I write addresses on mail in full awareness that machines probably can't read it, but I get paid for it. On behalf of calligraphers everywhere, thank you for doing your job and making sure that bride who really likes the illegible modern script doesn't find half her invitations never arrived. Medical illustration. It's my job to create illustrations and animations for doctors, scientists, researchers, hospitals, medical device companies, museums, and textbook publishers that accurately represent and educate people about scientific and medical subjects. If you've ever seen an anatomical diagram at the doctor's office or an illustration in a biology book, then you've seen the work of a medical illustrator and not a fine artist. They need a medical and biological background to be able to accurately portray the required scientific information. My significant other is a horse hairdresser. She drives interstate to horse shows and competitions and plats their hair. You know those fire evacuation maps that are entirely useless because no one's going to stop and look at a map on their way out of a burning building? Yeah, I designed those. You know how Legoland is full of huge models with millions of bricks? People design, build, and glue those by hand, one brick at a time. I'm a model builder for Legoland, and I absolutely love what I do. A lot of people are asking how I got into my job. It was really a right place and right time kind of thing, since Legoland was opening a new workshop near me and hiring people to fill it. I've always been a massive fan and lifelong Lego builder, so my family and friends pushed me to apply. I took a building evaluation, showed them a portfolio of stuff I'd done growing up, and they liked it, so I got a job. We have people with backgrounds in theatre, biology, literature, and even former military. Some people there weren't even Lego builders before they applied. I'm not sure what they look for in the hiring process, but I sure stuck out to them being as passionate as I am about the bricks. I was a funeral musician for quite a long time, 4 to 6 funerals a week, mainly Catholic services. I made approximately $40,000 a year just in funeral service fees. Most people know that I'm joking when I tell them I did that as a job. Basically, I show up at funerals and play or sing religious service music. I could do it almost without thinking since there are really only 20 to 25 songs or hymns that people really want to hear at a funeral. You show them a list of suggestions and they get their service music, easy peasy. The times where you got an odd request were exciting by comparison. Show up 15 minutes before, leave 10 minutes after, collect your check on the way out. It sounds pretty heartless the way I describe it, and perhaps it is a bit. That sort of mindset is needed, however, to have any shot at being able to do the job. We all developed a bit of gallows humor just to cope with the sadness of comforting mourners on a daily basis. However, you can't really know what it's like to do that job until you're actually doing it. I've sung at a funeral for 4 dead kids and their mother who died trying to protect them in a freak house fire. I showed up to sing one time for the funeral of a 20-year-old who choked to death on a sour ball. The casket was still open. Some regions of the country have open casket calling hours in the church just before the service. Another time, I sang at the funeral of a woman who'd just given birth to her 2nd child. Her family members were wailing and throwing themselves at the casket. If you think you know what I mean by wailing, you probably don't know. It's a unique, haunting sound that creeps into my mind at low moments. I call it the best-worst job I'll ever have. I work in Legionella risk assessment. My job is to assess the likelihood that Legionella bacteria will grow in a water system. It largely involves explaining how someone's water isn't safe to use, and then I get called horrible things. Most places I go are schools, hospitals, and care homes. Management teams try to reduce costs while making the establishment look nice. Often, one of the first areas cut is maintenance of the water system because people don't realize just how dangerous it can be not to look after it. Legionellosis can be fatal. I work in the UK and health and safety regulations are pretty strict. The US doesn't have any regulations on Legionella. The company I worked for estimated that roughly 1/3 of pneumonia-related deaths in the USA are as a result of a form of legionellosis. This is because Legionnaire's disease is astonishingly similar to forms of pneumonia. The US has one of the highest mortality rates from pneumonia in the developed Western world. If you want to protect yourself, you can take some basic precautions. If you live in an apartment block, find out where your hot water comes from. If you have a storage cylinder in your flat, make sure it's heated to over 60 degrees or 140 Fahrenheit. It takes 20 minutes to kill most bacteria at this temperature. If the hot water is stored communally, there isn't much you can do. If you have a combination boiler or instant boiler on your wall somewhere, you should be fine in most instances. Make sure you use all of your taps once a week. This stops water going stagnant in your pipes and prevents bacteria from growing. Make sure you clean your shower heads. This is a big one. Bacteria love to grow in lime scale and grime. If you're spraying warm water through a dirty shower, you could breathe in lots of bacteria that would love to do some nasty stuff to you. Just another way that the narrator was unaware of that the planet is trying to kill us at any given moment. The more you know, I suppose. Check those water cylinder temperatures, guys. I'm the one who watches the GPS traces for people on ankle devices. I call your police officer when you leave or cut your strap. And no, we don't literally watch the thousands of devices on our screen, we only look at the GPS traces when the system sends an alert. For a while I worked night security at specifically abandoned buildings, one of them being a water park kids liked to sneak into in the middle of the night. Yeah, terrifying people is fun. I'm a mosquito inspector. I travel to mosquito breeding habitats, look for larvae, then treat them accordingly. Also, some adulticiding. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I organize funerals on behalf of the state for people without any family. I have to search through their homes for any information about them, and I often turn up odd or interesting stuff. There are too many stories to recount them all, but here are a couple that stand out. I had one for a guy who lived in the same flat for over 30 years. Didn't have any family and only knew his landlord and maybe one or two neighbors. Nice man, but very private, always kept to himself, is a thing I hear and it applies to this person. He had an unusual name, but I'll call him Harry Smith for the sake of the video. I searched the property, found nothing unusual, and the funeral was held with minimal attendance. A few weeks later, when his estate was being wrapped up, we discovered that Harry Smith, same unusual name, same date and place of birth, had died years earlier in a different country. How could someone have died twice? More investigation turned up the fact that Harry had a brother who had gone AWOL from the army in the 50s and never been heard from again. The real Harry had died first, and his brother must have assumed his brother's name and lived in virtual isolation for half a century. I suppose terrified of being caught. A lady who had lots of friends but no family. She told all of her friends that she had had 2 sons and a husband who'd been killed in a car crash and had never remarried. She was apparently a very friendly, caring person from all the accounts I got from her friends. In her property was a case which had the birth certificates for her sons and her marriage certificate, but I did find it odd that the death certs weren't there as well. You get used to certain behaviors, and there was something that didn't add up about that to me. I put an ad in a local newspaper where her sons were born. I don't know what I was expecting, but sometimes you just hit and hope to see if something comes back. Anyway, I got a call from one of her sons who'd seen the ad. They were both still alive and had been looking for the mother who'd walked out on them for most of their lives. It was really sad. They had so many questions which would now never be answered. I put them in touch with the friends who were also devastated to learn that they'd been lied to. Nobody ever knew why she had walked out, and now they never would. There was also the man who got eaten by cats. There was a guy who lived alone and had about 20 cats living with him. A bit of a hermit and a bit odd from what his neighbors said. He died from natural causes, we believe, in his property, but with no one to find him, the cats spent the next week or two eating him. By the time the police broke down the door, he was practically skeletal, but apparently still with a full head of hair. Sadly, most of the cats were caught and put down, but a few escaped and were still in the area. When I visited the property, I got talking to a neighbor and one of the cats appeared. It had such a lush, shiny coat, and the neighbor was stroking it. Of course, the neighbors only knew that the man had died and not what the cats had done. Otherwise, I doubt that they would have been so comfortable with it. I saw cats in a different light after that. The mattress where he died was still soaked in blood, and the floorboards were sodden with cat pee. It was all a bit gruesome. Then there was the school photo. I found a school photo of a boy about 8 years old in the top of a drawer of a bedside table in one property. The deceased was a man in his 50s, no known family. I could make out part of the school name on the boy's shirt, and thanks to Google I managed to get in touch with the school, which was on the other side of the country. I sent over a scan of the picture, and amazingly the person I sent it to could remember the boy, who was now in his late 20s, and what's more, knew where his mum lived. The lady from the school contacted the mum, and it turned out it was her ex-husband who had died. He had had a drinking problem and had left the country several years earlier. She and her son had no idea where he'd ended up, and in the end they brought the body back to where the man was from for the funeral, with a estranged family in attendance, which was as nice an end as possible in the circumstances. Also, I found all sorts of adult reading material and other, bedroom toys. There was a transgender male to female whose floor was covered in adult toys. There were also a lot of Barbies. Another was a man who was a classic granddad type, toy train sets, pictures of old aircraft, tartan blankets, everything neat and tidy, who also had an impressive stash of gay reading material. And an older lady who had a framed picture of Patrick Swayze by her bed. I thought that was sweet. The longer you do it, the more you learn that everyone is unique, even if what makes them unique is hidden from even their closest friends. Ah, good. So traumatizing people with your private bedroom interests after you pass away isn't only the domain of people with families. Darn, I thought at least if I died alone I could do so without fear of judgment from people. Oh well. I just came off the road as a semi-truck driver and going to be starting as a drive-away driver. Basically, you pick up a semi, school bus, city bus, boom truck, straight truck, coach, ambulance, fire truck, RV, or even just a normal car or truck. You pick up the keys, papers, and inspect the vehicle before heading off. You do a daily log like a normal trucker would do, but you don't carry cargo. You basically just drive across the United States and drop the vehicle off. Sleep in a hotel for 10 hours and do it again. If you don't feel like working next week, ask dispatch for a vehicle that needs to be near where your house is located. The best part is you make your own days off because you are your own boss. Tire retread. A lot of people seem to think that old worn-out tires just get thrown out. Nope. A good bit will have the tread buffed off and a new tread applied. This is especially true with big rig tires. They are super expensive and it's much cheaper to retread them. I run a mail inserting machine for the state government. The state sends out a lot of mail, like holy crap. Most of ours comes from public welfare, but there's lots of different mailers from many agencies. We had a special job about a month ago that was over 9,000 pieces, on top of our mountains of normal daily jobs. The machine I run can do about 8,500 an hour of the easiest type of mailing, which is single sheet, no barcode, and goes in the most common envelope we have. If everything is running absolutely perfectly, which it never is because the machines can get grumpy, the best I did on that job was 71,000 in a night where I stayed overtime 4 hours. We get a break every 2 and half an hour for lunch. So 71,000 was the most I ever did in a day. Typically in a shift I can run 20 to 30,000 C-fold pieces or 15 to 20 half-folds, depending on the types of jobs there are. Extras like inserts slow things down and larger packages take longer than single sheets. So let's say you've applied for medical assistance, just as a hypothetical. Whether you're accepted or rejected, you'll get a notice in the mail about it. This notice is not mailed to you individually from the assistance office, it's bundled with thousands of other similar notices and sent to us digitally. It shows up on a big industrial printer, we have several, and the guys who run those print the files out, pile them up on carts or skids, and bring them to us inserters. We load the mailings onto the machine, which feeds the paper in, reads barcodes if the job has them, staples and folds the mail, puts in a return envelope or informational insert if need be, stuffs everything in an envelope, prints an address on the envelope, if the envelope doesn't have windows, stamps it with postage and spits everything onto a conveyor where I collect it into mail bins to put on a cart and take to the bank to get pre-sorted. Sometimes the machines act up and we have to fix them. Much cursing is involved. When I started with the state, I had a traditional desk job. It was ungodly boring and I gained a bunch of weight because I did almost nothing. I'm glad I found this job because I'm an unmotivated person and this is the workout I can't skip. I only sit down on my breaks. I'm always pushing carts, picking up boxes of envelopes, reams of paper, collecting mail and lifting mail trays, dragging fresh skids off envelopes from the back. I've lost over 30 pounds in a year and haven't changed my diet or anything. I'm just always moving. Having grown up with blue-collar parents, I think I'm just happier in a blue-collar working environment. It feels more comfortable and natural to me than being in an office. Plus, I'm not on first shift anymore, so I get a pay differential and I wake up at noon. It's the frickin' bomb. I work as an activities director at an Alzheimer's unit. A lot of places just let their residents sit at their rooms and wait to die, but at my place of work, we do tons of stuff like set up concerts, host church and wine tastings. It's the most fun and rewarding job I've ever had. What I normally do, if we don't have any guests or therapy or church service coming in, is bring my guitar and play a little concert for them. If you play an instrument, it's the perfect place to play, especially because they'll love anything you play, even if you're terrible. I'll also do small exercise routines in the morning, just to get them to do arm raises, leg kicks, just stuff to get the blood flowing. The ladies at my work love to bake cakes, so what I'll do is throw a cake in the oven, just one of those do-it-yourself Pillsbury ones you can get, and when it's done, I have the residents decorate and eat them. I've even heard of some places bringing a Wii and having the residents play things like golf and tennis and stuff, but I haven't tried that. I'm too scared the residents might get a little freaked out by it all. It seems interesting though. If you want to do more physical activities, those big parachutes are excellent. Just have all the residents in a circle and throw a ball in the middle and they'll love it. Reminds me of being in grade school as well. Just throwing around an inflatable beach ball is a fun activity for them as well. I'm a culinary producer on a food TV show, which basically means we handle all the food aspects of the program. If talent puts a chicken in the oven, cameras can't wait an hour, so my team swaps out the chicken for an already cooked piping hot one, or we choose all the secret ingredients on competition shows, build those massive pantries and help hosts and judges seem more food knowledgeable. I work for an international marine salvage company on a 200-foot tugboat in the Bering Sea. We do emergency tows and response when ships have issues. Basically, it's like AAA on the ocean. I think my job is well known, but maybe people don't quite comprehend it. I make costumes for movies. Seems normal. But I had a lady from accounts, we all work in the same studio lot, come to the costume department looking for a safety pin, and she was so taken aback by us sitting at sewing machines and was greatly impressed to hear that we could indeed make clothing. Like, where do you think the clothes on screen come from? H&M?
This seems like as good a day as any to stop lurking. I'm a AmITheA biologist. A good portion of my job is recovering carcasses and performing necropsies to determine cause of death. People are often confused when they see me dragging a dead AmITheA up a boat ramp to load it onto my truck. I also get to assist with rescues of sick or injured AmITheAs, so I'm not totally surrounded by death. When my coworkers and I talk shop in social settings, we definitely get weird stares. Some days it's hard to believe I get paid to do this work.
I was a tissue recovery specialist. Basically, when people die, you don't just take their important organs. You take cornea, bones, ligaments, ribs, heart valves, and even blood vessels. All of this is done by a group of 5 to 6 people that come in a few hours after death, prep the body, cut them open, and take all the things out. Stuff and place in plastic bones, there to replace what we took. Even plastic hips. They then sew up the body with a fine stitch. I've sewn the flesh of human dead. Party animals. What's the most desperate or tragic thing that you've witnessed in a nightclub? The sole nightclub in the town of about 10,000 people in rural Yorkshire where I'd grown up, and the only place open past midnight. That place had some grim sights in it. The average age was probably about 20, but the range was usually about 15 to 60. There was a chip and kebab pizza shop inside the club, so you quite often saw people dancing with a pint in one hand and a styrofoam box of chips in the other. But the really desperate part was the revolving dance floor. I don't know why the club had this, but it was just awful. It turned into a kind of pervert's sushi bar. Just desperate men standing around the edge, beckoning and trying to dance with the girls in the middle, and when they got rejected, they'd just wait for the girl to go round a time more or two, have a bit more to drink, and then try again. I live in a university town, and there's this old guy, at least 60, maybe even in his 70s, who frequents the same bar the students do. He wears a sequined blazer, a pair of short shorts and Speedos. I don't even know why he shows up. He always looks so scared and uncomfortable. Older people at clubs actually tend to liven them up if they're comfortable and in their element. If you can go through 40 and come out the other side wanting to party more power to you. How do you do, fellow kids? We were at a nightclub and my buddy went to the bathroom to go number 2. I realized he came back with a bouncer attached to his neck. I guess he got into a fight in the bathroom, so me and him were standing outside the club. He goes on to take out a cigarette. Keep in mind that the walls of these bars are like the stony ones, like gravel. I don't know how to explain it. The ones that have many rocks sticking out. Anyway, he leans against the wall, lights his smoke, pulls down his pants, and smears a dump down the wall. He's not done, he proceeds to rub his butt all over it, smearing the brown like Picasso. He looks at me and says, "Let's get out of here." A 6-foot-tall Swedish girl in a little black dress and heels, makeup done to the nines, dancing and projectile chucking up her way across the floor. The worst part was, people parted to let her through and then just kept dancing on the pools of upchuck. I decided I was far too sober for that stuff and I noped on out of there. I saw a girl and a guy screaming at each other. They went their separate ways. Then 10 minutes later, she was apologizing to him, but he's dismissive of her. She gets desperate, kneels in the middle of the dance floor, and starts going to town on his downstairs area with her mouth. At this point, half the crowd is cheering. He raises his arms victoriously as her girlfriends frantically try to pry her away from his rooster and this infinitely embarrassing moment. Hey, we've all been there, desperately trying to reason with our drunk idiot friends to not make literally the most humiliating and bad long-term decisions they could possibly make. Some of them are just so darn committed though, aren't they? Make better decisions, drunk friends. I'd use the term friend loosely, but I knew a guy who went up to this hot chick in a bar and said, "I will literally crap my pants right here, right now, if you'd go home with me later." She said, "Oh, go on then." And so he did, right then and right there. She did not go home with him later on. There's this regular, a guy who has to be more than 30, at a student nightclub that I frequent. He always appears to be sober and just walks around by himself, not dancing. He'll then stand behind girls and sort of stroke their legs until they notice and move away or tell him to F off. I don't think he's even attempting to pull any of these girls. I think he just gets satisfaction out of touching 19-year-old girls' bums and seeing how long he can get away with it. I don't smoke, but I was in the outside smoking area of a club talking with my friend, who did smoke, when suddenly a very attractive girl comes really close, stares into my eyes, and starts making out with me. She then releases me, stares at me, and says, "Oh yeah, I was wondering if you had a spare cigarette." I didn't, so she smiled, tapped my nose, and left, leaving me slightly confused, depressed, and very, very hard. A girl needed to wash her hair down for some reason. All of the sinks in the bathrooms were being used, so she went into the men's bathroom and proceeded to put the top of her head up against the wall of a urinal and used the urinal flush to wet her hair. I was the guy taking a tinkle to the left of her, witnessing all of this happening. I should mention I was 21 during this story. I went out with 2 girlfriends of mine to a club, and this 40-plus-year-old dude constantly hung near us all night. At one point, he came up to me and asked if they were mine, and drunk me was like, "Yeah, they're with me tonight." And he suddenly looked at me, grabbed his wallet and said, "How much for the blonde?" I've pooped in a nightclub before. That was pretty desperate and tragic. Someone walking around looking for unfinished drinks and drinking them. Plot twist, it's me when I'm already drunk, poor, and looking for free substances. A girl told me I look like Jay-Z, so I pretended to be him to get laid. She was probably on substances because I haven't been told I look like him since middle school. This girl I know was attempting to dance with this guy at a club, but she had no rhythm whatsoever, so she was just gyrating on his downstairs with her butt. It looked like she was listening to a different song. The guy ended up throwing up. I like to think it was because of her dancing and not at all the alcohol he drank. My girlfriend at the time had some friends in from out of town. She went downstairs to drink and dance with them and called me at around 1:30 to pick them up. I showed up at the club and found them dancing with each other upstairs. They were 4 pretty girls, about 23 to 25 years old each. I greeted them and then leaned against a rail and waited for them to be ready to leave. Along came a pudgy, short, disheveled, very drunk guy who leaned against the same rail. He tried to join them and dance, but they got rid of him twice. He then asked me why I wasn't trying to dance with one of them after he got rejected twice, and I said, "Just watch, I'll go home with all of them." When the bar closed at 2 a.m., I said to my girlfriend and her friends, "You're all ready to go?" and left with all 4 of them, leaving the drunk bro very confused. Hetero guys going to a gay club because more women let gay guys dance with them. I saw a guy vomit in a urinal trough, pick up his false teeth from said trough and place them back in his mouth whilst searching for an E in the wee-wee and upchuck lake. He also found this last thing and placed it back in his mouth. Ugh. Once, when I was in a club and went to the loo and washed my hands, there I saw this desperate guy going to a club right in the mirror. Saw an extremely drunk paraplegic guy almost get himself beat down by the surliest butch bull dyke you've ever seen. He came up behind her and grabbed her butt, asked her for a down-under kiss. She wheeled him away like, "Dude, get the frick out." He came back and did the same thing again. All of her friends had to hold her back from pummeling him. He was like, "Frick you, B-word, I got money," and pulled a wad of cash out and started flaunting it off at her and calling her the good old C-word as loud as he could. She charged back and lunged on him. Everyone intervened. He got the wind knocked out of him was all, but I thought I was going to see the smallest little guy get his butt beat in a wheelchair. The look of despair in his face was sad when he had his money out, flashing it around. Well, he deserved it. Turns out no matter what your life experience, everyone has it in them to behave like an absolute piece of crap. Probably a good thing that everyone reined in Xena the nightclub princess so that she didn't get charged. This guy was walking around giving business cards, and if I recall correctly it said, "Please have fun with me tonight. I have a lot of skills, and I'm fun." This drunk Sheila came stumbling out of the club, and people in line started pointing at her bum. A used Johnny was hanging out the backside of her dress, and she was just parading down the street not knowing any better. Really missed the cross in Sydney. I'm a Sydney sider myself. Me and my mates like to say Jesus is really dead on the cross. Not a nightclub per se, but this one time I was at a bar and I saw this really drunk guy approach this woman, who was with a group of friends and tried hitting on her. He wasn't being creepy or anything, and she was being pretty polite about it, but after a few minutes, he peed his pants. All the girls broke into a fit of laughter, and the guy had the most embarrassed look on his face I've ever seen. He turned around and stumbled quietly back to his friends, who took him out to get him a cab. I felt so bad for him. Not a club, but at a festival I saw a girl swallow an E-pill and then minutes later she chucked up. Then her and her girlfriends started sifting through said chuck to eventually find said pill and re-eat it. At the bar with my buddies Daryl and Mike, and this really super skanky girl came up to us, falling all over herself, drunk clothes messed up, an absolute train wreck. She said to us, "So, have any of you hooked up with someone you've just met?" Me and Daryl pointed to Mike and I say, "He has the biggest eggplant among us," and then we both bolted in different directions, leaving him standing there stunned. He'd just turned around from the bar. So the night goes on, the bar closes down. We can't find him, and finally we just say screw it and leave. We get to the parking lot and he is hip deep in this girl in our car. When I went to celebrate my first summer holiday with my friends when I was 16, there were surprisingly many old retired guys trying to hit on 16-year-old girls in the clubs by trying to grind on them from behind. I was confused by feeling bad for them and finding them insanely creepy at the same time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm a lesbian, but I usually hang out with gay men. I don't understand the stereotype that we don't get along because I love these guys to death. I used to go to the clubs like 5 nights a week with my best friend and workout buddy. We found that people like watching us dance with each other in seductive ways. It got him attention from the gentlemen and me attention from the ladies. It worked out very nicely in both our favors. So we'd dance all over each other until a more gender-appropriate partner came a-knockin'. One of our straight girlfriends used to come out with us too. Let me just say that I absolutely adore her, but she had issues. She was dealing with a divorce, and she was also about a decade older than all of us and just really liked the attention she got from all these young, hot men. When she saw how my friend and I danced together, she decided it was okay for her to dance with him in the same way too. He didn't seem to mind it at first, he also is a massive attention magnet, but then she started taking it too far. She'd rip his shirt off, bite his stomach, lick his chest. I felt bad for her. She was lonely, but she was looking for intimacy in exactly the wrong place. One time I was in Pacha in New York City, in the VIP section for some reason. There was this set of older ladies there. They're probably around my age now, 28, and they'd paid the extra cash to celebrate an actuary chick's birthday. Suddenly, like halfway through the night, the bodyguards came in and kicked these girls out, so some hot young things my age can come in. I hear them exclaim, "They'd let us in if we made out." Pretty sad bouncers, dude, especially messed up to kick out a paying customer on their birthdays. It really stuck with me. I still hate that place. I was at my local club last year dancing, and this man in his late 30s started dancing really close to me. So I kept moving away from him, but he kept following me. Eventually he started grabbing me and touching me, so I asked him politely at least 5 times not to touch me and kept moving away. He followed me and was rubbing his hands on my butt, so I punched him because I felt really threatened, and he would not take no as an answer. He turned around and said, "Listen, you little witch. I'm an undercover police officer and I'll arrest you for attacking an officer if you don't dance with me." I told him he was a creep and I acted in self-defense. And I got away from him long enough to tell the bouncers that there was a creepy pest on the dance floor harassing 20-year-old girls and pretending to be a cop. I kinda came here expecting to find funny drunken hookups, idiocy, and stories that people would be mocked for in their friend circles for the rest of their lives, but I'm mostly just getting reminded at how many gross, skeevy guys there are out there. Yuck. Karaoke bar a couple of years back. I was there with a friend that everyone in the venue thinks is my girlfriend. She's not. Someone gets up and sings. They're reasonable, above average for the place, but every time the song has a break in it, they say, "Check me out on MySpace, look up, username, download my tracks." So that's the answer to the question. Someone trying to self-promote their meh music in a karaoke bar and plugging their MySpace account in 2013. But what happened next was hilarious. I turn to my friend and you say, "You know what would be hilarious if the next person got up and said, 'I hope one day to be half as good as they think they are.'" I wasn't serious, she thought I was. We got called up next and said it. Half the place laughed and the other half thought, "Oh my god, did she just say that?" The 30 to 40-year-old guys hitting on girls that could be as young as 14. Yep, the bars across the river from where I live are 18 plus, yet they're notorious for letting in people as young as 14 as long as they had plausible ID. These guys also look the same. Fancy jeans, watches, polos with the collar popped. Also of note, the guys who film girls dancing. These guys don't work for the club either. I saw one guy get tossed from a club for this. I once heard a girl say to a friend of hers, "You should definitely make out with him, he'll give you a free drink." It's not what happened at the club, it's what happened after. We all went back to my buddy Will's house with a few girls. I didn't invite any of them back, but the girls seemed to like me a little more than the guy they came back with. Throughout the wee hours of the morning, he started getting a bit bothered by it. Finally, when we all went to bed and I was cuddling with one, his drunk butt walks out of his room and yells, "Why the frick is no one cuddling with me?" I think I just about died. That's a great way to make it happen, bro. My boyfriend went to get some drinks. Another guy came up to me at the bar, and the first thing he told me was that he was a virgin and asked if I could be his first. He was desperate as heck. Didn't even tell me his name or nothing. Just asked to do the nasty. It was kind of funny and pathetic. You know, I bet that line works for him. I had a friend who did something similar and said it worked 1 out of 10 times. Many years ago, a group of us, 4 couples, totaling 8 people, went to Hammerjack's, which is a very popular club in Baltimore at the time. We went to see a big-name group that was performing there. It was a few hours away, so we were staying at a hotel somewhat near the bar that night. All of us were sitting at the bar during the show. We got there early and got 8 seats in a row at the bar. Sometime during the night, a girl jumped up on the bar and started dancing. Hammerjacks was the kind of place where this wasn't discouraged. People just pick up their drinks to clear the dance floor and let her go. She was wearing a short skirt and didn't mind that it slid up her thighs a bit as she danced. Guys were whooping and hollering at her, and the more they did it, the wilder she danced. She thrived on the attention she was getting. The corner of the bar was a few seats down from me, and she danced 10 or so feet down one side, then rounded the corner and came 10 feet or so up our side. Back and forth, back and forth. Then she started doing sexy, flirty moves in front of any man that whooped the loudest. I was pretty lit by this time, and I enjoyed the show, but at the same time I was a bit surprised it was happening, and happening right in front of me. Then the undies came off. Our corner of the bar went absolutely frickin' nuts. The whooping and hollering turned into clapping and whistling, and she just loved it. Back and forth she went, and when her skirt would fall to where it should be, she'd pull it up a bit so the lower part of her butt cheeks would be out for the shakin'. By this time we were out of our minds laughing, yelling, whooping and whistling. It was unbelievable. But she wasn't done yet. The girls we were with weren't happy with the show, but 2 of the guys in our group weren't in a committed relationship with their date yet, so they didn't give a rat's butt what they thought. They were a lot more interested in the chick dancing on the bar, who I should mention was pretty hot, 8 out of 10. Now comes the part that actually shocked me. Obviously, guys were trying to touch her as she danced by, and I guess she chose the special ones, because the next thing she was doing was a dancing squat on the bar while riding guys' fingers. Yep, you heard that right. Then she'd stand up and dance down the bar. Guys saw what she was doing and allowing and put their hands on the bar with a few fingers in the air, and she'd dance over their hands and sink down on their fingers. But not every guy, just a select few. She had scruples, I guess. One of my buddies, sitting right next to me, was one of them. Like I said, this was a long time ago, but I'll never forget the look on his face as she was doing the 3-finger squat on his hand, and he looked at me with a crap-eating grin as he was shouting, "Yeah, yeah!" with everyone else in our corner. Hammerjacks. Good times. Too bad it closed a few years ago. What in the surreal, ever-loving frick? I can imagine that if they allowed or even encouraged evening entertainment like that, then there were probably any number of reasons why they were closed down. I've never seen an encounter like this, and I hope I never do. There's a little corner bar near my place, generally very low-key and friendly. There is some old guy who shows up every Friday night on his rascal in his Colonel Sanders tux and his Elvis shades. He makes his way between all the tables where the women are. They always kind of giggle, and I just kind of thought they found him charming and cute. Turns out he tends to make comments about down-under kisses and how his joint still works, and he just needs a 20-year-old woman to work him over. Everyone I've talked with thinks he's really creepy, and they all try to go the other way when they see him coming. Who knew? The craziest thing I've ever had happen in a club was someone finding me attractive. There was this dude that was trying to get my attention for the longest of time, but I wasn't interested, so I ignored him. Near the end of the night, me and the guys were dancing, and I didn't notice said dude dancing behind me on the Go-Go Boy stage. And homeboy had the nerve to teabag me and then try to play it off like he was joking. Now that I think about it, it's kinda funny, but I was annoyed when it happened. There's this absolute toilet of a venue that I frequent that's notorious for this kind of garbage. I walked in there once with a bunch of mates for a 21st. Off to one side of the bar, kind of out of the way, I saw this bloke sitting in an armchair whilst a girl straddled him with her shirt off, rubbing her chest in his face. Keep in mind, this isn't an exotic dance club, so this was out of the ordinary. Being half cut, I immediately charged over to the guy, who was waving his arms around like he was suffocating, and high-fived his outstretched arm. The girl turned to look at me, tears running down her face, and said, completely sober, "Please don't encourage him, this is already humiliating enough." I had no idea how to respond, so I wandered off to look for my mates. By the time I found them and told them what happened, the guy and girl were gone. She left her bra behind though, and a fat bald bloke had wrapped it around his head. At least, I assume it was hers, he might have bought it himself. Overall, an odd night. When did you think you were about to die in your own home? Someone walked past my window, which might not have been that weird except I'm on the 8th frickin' floor. I almost had a cardiac. Apparently there were renovations being done on the building, and they were building the scaffolding up to my level. There's a state prison less than a mile away from my house. When I was 18, my family was out of town. My dad called the house saying someone had escaped from the prison and to lock all the doors and have something handy to protect myself with, which I did. It was at night and I turned on the police scanner. He was incarcerated for the unspeakable act with over a dozen teenage girls. I looked out the window in the back door just in time to see a man in an orange jumpsuit jogging through my backyard, stop, see me, and start walking towards my back door. Next thing I knew, police ran into him and tackled him. One of the most terrifying moments of my life. This was back when we still had a landline at my house. Ours was the very last one on the line, so it sometimes did funny things like ring for no reason or just drop a call in the middle. One night I was home alone and it started to storm really bad, and the phone rings. I pick up and it's the woman from 911 asking why I called. I say, "I didn't call 911. I've just received a call from this number. Are you home alone?" "Yeah, no one could have made that call." "Are you sure? Would you like me to send a car?" In my head, I was thinking, God, yes, come save me. But I said, "I don't think so. I really didn't call." "Okay, ma'am. Have a good night." I sat on my couch with my dog and didn't move till my parents came home. It freaked me the frick out. In short, on a dark, stormy night, my phone called 911 by itself. For people saying they would have sent a car out anyway, 1, I live at the end of a very long private drive, so they very well could have sent one by and I wouldn't have known it. 2, this was only the first time it happened, and the second time they actually did send someone. I mean, having your house's weird phone lines get you blocked from the emergency services line because there were too many non-urgent calls seems like it could be a really bad thing in the long run. What a strange phenomenon. When I was about 8, my bedroom was full of windows with no blinds. One day I heard something outside, but I was too scared to go to the window to see. The next day I went outside and there were footprints in the snow around my windows. For the next week or so, I'd refused to sleep in that room. So every morning when my mother got up, she'd find me asleep under the living room table. One night as I was under the table, I heard someone at the back door. They were jiggling the doorknob trying to get in. I ran into my mother's room screaming and she called the police. Sure enough, the same shoe prints were at the back door. The police said there had been a bunch of break-ins in the area. In short, someone was stalking my house when I was 8. When I was a young lad, staying with cousins in the Dales, in Oregon, in a quasi-rural area, we had a huge yard and the nearest house was maybe a quarter mile away. Anyway, the 5 of us kids were out playing after dark. The idea was that one person would go and hide and the other 4 would count and then come find the hidden person, who would then try to run back to base without being tagged. My oldest cousin, who was perhaps 12, hid and the rest of us set out in different directions as per usual. Someone yelled, "I see him," and we all come running and give chase. The chase does not go in the direction of the base, however, but towards a bunch of trees. The 4 of us more or less had the trees surrounded when my cousin came out from another direction. Once he appears, the person cornered in the trees headed towards the road. We found out the next day that the neighbors had someone break into their house. In short, me and 3 other 8 to 10-year-olds cornered someone who was probably a burglar, thinking he was it in a game of tag. Luckily, I wasn't alone for mine. Me and my wife were at one of her friends' houses. It was about 10 at night when the doorbell rang. We all stop talking and stare at each other. I ask if anyone has ever come over this late or if she was expecting someone. She said no. So I go to the front of the house and look out at the window and don't see anyone. So I open the door and there's a mutilated dead squirrel right on the welcome mat. We turned on the floodlights on the house and looked around but didn't see or hear anyone. It freaked all of us the frick out and we never found out who did it or why, but just assumed it was some jerk kid. I grew up on a ranch about 10 miles from the nearest town. One of our favorite things to do in the summer was to spread out a few sleeping bags in our backyard and have campouts. We had a huge dark activated light attached to our barn that we'd turn off with a high-powered flashlight to tell ghost stories and try to scare each other. One night I had 2 of my friends over for a campout. We shut off the barn light and sat in complete darkness. If you haven't been out in the country, it might be hard to appreciate exactly how pitch black it can be. We were talking in those low, scary story voices. One of my friends was in the middle of her story, probably the one about the serial killer licking that girl's hand, when she just stopped short. She said, "Who's that?" and pointed up the road. We all looked and saw what she was talking about. You could barely make out the figure, certainly the silhouette of a person walking down the road. That was unusual enough, but the way this person was walking was what was unsettling. The figure was standing straight up and was walking in such a stiff and unnatural way that he or she could have been marching. We couldn't make out any other defining features of the figure. After watching and having a whispered debate on what to do, we decided the best course of action would be to shout at the figure. I screamed, "Who are you?" at the top of my 12-year-old lungs. One of my friends pointed the flashlight at the figure, but it was too far away to distinguish any features. The figure did hear us and just sort of turned around, walking in that particular way. We watched until they were out of sight, and then we woke up my parents. I still have no idea who he or she was or what they were doing way out in the country. I went downstairs to get some water at about 2 a.m. In the kitchen, we've got a clock on the wall. As I walk into the room, acutely aware of every creak that echoes around the house surrounding me, I heard the fast wind of something mechanical. As I glanced slowly to my left, subconsciously grabbing my glass a little tighter, I see the clock hands on the wall spinning at about 50 times the normal speed. Around and around and around. I think to myself very clearly, this is how movies start. This is it. I was ready to defend myself with my glass whilst dashing over to grab a knife. It was then that I realized we had a radio clock which automatically sets itself. I'd never seen it do that before. It was now 1 a.m. The narrator doesn't know what this contraption is and why it was resetting at 2 a.m. in particular. I think this might be a device of ages past. I'd probably have been up all night with that weapon, to be honest. This one is absolutely true. Many years ago, I lived in a big, old 3-story house that had a room on the middle level that we converted into an office. I used to write financial reports late at night that were published early in the morning. The office had a few computers, and my toddler son had been playing on one of them for most of the evening, right up until I finished work at around 9 p.m. By then, he had fallen asleep, so I switched off his monitor, scooped him up, and took him to bed, flicking off the light as I left. For the next couple of hours, I relaxed in another room watching TV with my wife. She went to bed about 11 p.m., and at midnight, I decided to do the same. I realized I'd left a window open in the office, so I went in there to close it. The house was silent and the room was pitch black dark and ice cold when I walked in. Colder than it should have been for the time of year, even with the window open. I paused for a moment in the center of the room to think about this, and then it happened. Bink, bink, bink. Something was tapping on the glass. But it wasn't the random tappings of a bird or another kind of animal. It was completely uniform. It sounded human, but I was on the second floor, so how was that possible? It was so dark, but I couldn't make anything out against the black glass. But a few moments later, it happened again. Bink, bink, bink. By now, I was already feeling on edge, and then something happened that chilled me to the core. Because out of the corner of the room, to my right, from the darkness, a high-pitched, almost squeaky voice began to speak quite loudly.
"I can see you."
I froze on the spot. My blood went cold, my bowels prepared for evacuation. My God, I thought, I never wrote that book. Any book. It spoke again, but with greater emphasis on that all-important word.
"I can see you."
I was determined that I was almost certainly screwed, so I figured, what the hell? I turned slowly to my right and walked into the darkness until I finally reached my son's computer. Nothing there but an empty chair. But no talking now, just silence. A horrible silence. Carefully, I reached over and switched on the monitor. The screen brightened and there it was. Something red and horrible. Once again, it tapped on the glass. It was fricking Elmo on my kid's Sesame Street game. A plain white van would creep very slowly down our street at around 2 a.m. weekly during the summer. I was 19. Our street was not a dead-end road but had residential roads at either end, preventing it from being a through street, so this van was clearly not making a route of any sort. I'd hear it and watch from my upstairs window bedroom every time it passed by. One night, my parents and brother were out of town and I was home alone, happily sleeping when I heard a car door slam out front. I jumped up to look out the window and the van was backed into our driveway. I couldn't see anyone moving around outside, but the lights were off and they were parked. I ran into the hall and crouched into a ball and tried to listen for any sounds and plan an attack or escape route. I was shaking uncontrollably. A few minutes later, I heard the engine start up and the van tore out of my driveway. I never saw it again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It was pretty early in the morning and I heard some weird noises downstairs. My wife was out of town with her mum, so it was just me and the cats in the house, and they were both on the bed with me, and also looked kind of freaked out. So I got up slowly and heard another loud crash and some glass breaking. I didn't own a weapon or anything at the time, so I was looking around for anything which I could use, which ended up being this brass vase thing I kept change in. I grabbed that and crept downstairs, slightly freaking out. More noises than a "ah" noise. Turns out I left the back door open and my goat wandered into the kitchen and crapped everywhere and broke a shelf. I yelled at the goat and he went back outside. I woke up in the middle of the night because my television turned on. I don't have cable, so it's all static. Then it shuts off, and I just lay there not sure of what to think. Then it turns back on, and back off again. This keeps happening, and I was about to crap myself. I start to get up to attempt to look around, and I heard a thud nearby. I bravely run to the switch to turn the lights on and investigate. The remote was trapped between my mattress and the wall, and my moving around in my sleep was pressing the power button. When I got up, it released the remote and it fell to the ground, causing the thud. I'm glad you're more inquisitive than I am, because I think I would have just moved back in with my family and flat out abandoned my house if that happened. It's not worth the risk when the horror movie symptoms start coming up that strong. My sister had some friends over watching horror films, and I was out LANing for most of the night. When I got back at around 1 a.m., all of the lights were off except for the television. I walked up to the back door, trying to open it silently to sneak up and yell, "Boo!" to scare them. The little craps had locked the door. Front door is never open, so my only option to get in was my bedroom window, which I could climb up a tree to access. But I wanted some revenge. I went up to the front door, which is a massive oak thing with a big brass knocker on the inside. Yeah, I don't understand that to this day. I slammed it a dozen times really fast and then bolted around the corner to my window. I climbed inside, hearing them chattering about trying to look out the window to see who was knocking. The door to my room was off-kilter, so it swung open slowly if unlatched, and it creaked like mad. So I turned the knob to unlatch it and stand behind the door. Crack. Dead silence from the chatter squad. My sister apparently was the bravest of the bunch because she walked in and tried to flick on the light. The switch is beside the fully opened door, so when she reached for it, I grabbed her arm. Such a scream, and the best part was that one of her friends bolted out of the house and ran home in her pajamas before she had a chance to hear the relieved sigh. Fun times last decade. One time, the floor outside my room creaked a little bit. It was probably a murderer with a knife. When I was a young lad, I could never get to sleep, so I'd just stare out of the window and look at the night sky. One night, my parents had just gone to the shop thinking that I was asleep. I got out of bed and walked over to the window, ready to stare at the sky and imagine flying to another planet. But instead of stars, I saw a face staring right at me. It had a wild look in his eyes and his hair was all scraggly and matted. I screamed in terror and dove back under the covers, but not before I saw the face disappear, its eyes widening, mouth open in horror. Half an hour later, still shocked from seeing this face, I heard my parents' car drive into the driveway. The door slammed and I heard the sound of feet crunching on gravel. I heard a scream. An ear-splitting, blood-curdling scream. Thinking my parents had seen the face too, I rushed downstairs, opened the front door, and almost tripped over a body lying on the floor. It was the face. I screamed too and walked backwards, stumbling on the step into our house and falling backwards. My dad called an ambulance and the cops ushered me and my mum into the kitchen. We were both in shock, and my dad was too. We stayed up all night. In the morning, things became clear. The man, a known unspeakable act offender, had fallen from my balcony and hit his head on the wall, killing him instantly. I never told my parents I saw the face. When I was younger, I was home alone in a house that I know was haunted. It was not uncommon to hear people walking around the house in parts where no one was staying. Doors would mysteriously open and shut themselves, and one door would always lock from the inside. One night, I was home alone. It was late and I was just watching some TV. I hear the all-too-familiar noise of a door shutting and then footsteps of someone coming up the stairs to the main floor. I look, expecting to see my parents, but there were none. The footsteps then continued to walk right past me and then proceeded to walk up the stairs to the top floor. with the door at the top of the stairs shutting. I freaked the frick out, technical term, and shouted, "Is anyone there?" To which I hear a whispered response in my ear of, "No." Needless to say, I ran the frick out of the house. I live in the woods of Canada, about 8 kilometers outside the town of Bragg Creek. I've been a city boy all my life, so adapting to the difference of living in nature has been an adventure. The silence, the absolute inky blackness of moonless nights, the way the trees surrounding the house are turned into a bright duotone of black and blue, casting impossibly long, mournful shadows on nights where the moon is out. But the beauty of daytime has made adapting relatively easy, and I was surprised at how quickly I was growing accustomed to my new surroundings. Then one night, a month into living there, I was awakened by something in the middle of the night. My heart pounding, and with that sense it was a noise that you can almost remember that woke you up. I was alone. My girlfriend had spent the night in town with friends, and it was so dark I couldn't see my hand an inch in front of my face if I tried. I lay awake, hearing the breeze rustle the leaves faintly outside the open window, when a nearly indescribable lingering scream erupted in the night. I sat bolt upright in bed, heart pounding like a beast trying to escape my chest. Again, the scream cuts through the night, starting my mind racing. What the frick is that? Insane explanations flew into my mind. Is it a woman? A monster? An injured animal? A fricking alien? 4 or 5 times more, the scream pierces the silence, mostly getting further from my home. I got up and closed the window and crazily went back to sleep. The next morning I emailed my neighbor about an acre away to see if they heard the same thing. He had, and he knew what it was. Apparently, it was the sound of a mother cougar calling her cubs, and that call is famous for sounding like a woman in distress. I haven't heard it since. I walked in on my roommate once who was tickling his pickle to a video of old people doing the deed. What has been seen cannot be unseen. Yeah, although not quite in the spirit of some of the other stories we've had here, that one would certainly be its own kind of haunting, wouldn't it? I can certainly see myself moving after that one. When I was younger, maybe 13 to 14, my sister and I were home alone. We lived in a very rural area on a dirt road, and the nearest neighbor was over a mile away. We were instructed to not open the door for anyone, no matter what. So we're just hanging out, playing video games, watching TV, among other things, and the dogs started barking. We heard the distinctive sound of a vehicle door closing. Next thing we know, someone is banging on the door. We went to peek outside the windows, and there was this guy we'd never seen before out there. So we just sat in the corner, peering out of the window, trying to be very quiet and hoping he'd just go away. Then, out of nowhere, this freak tries to open our door, which is of course locked. Well, we really start to panic, and he could probably hear us crying and saying stuff like, "Oh my god, what if he breaks in? Get the phone!" He's obviously getting more and more annoyed because he just keeps shaking the door harder and trying to twist the locked doorknob. Then, all of a sudden, he just stopped. He walked back to his truck, got in, and left. We, of course, immediately called our parents, and all of this led to my dad getting 2 German shepherds and a chain-link fence. We still to this day have no fricking clue what he wanted or why he tried to get into our house. We're just really thankful he didn't. I can still feel the fear trying to reassure myself that this one wasn't real. So here we go. July 2009, I was spending some time at my parents' farm in upstate New York. We have a lot of land, but no animals. The farm across the road has cows, but at this time they were penned up and what I saw definitely wasn't bovine. Around 6 p.m, my parents left for Cape Cod, repeating every rule and precaution that they could muster as I ushered them out the door. One last reminder to put food and water in the barn before it was too dark. We keep the door cracked open and leave water for the wild cats that keep the mice population at bay. Excited for the soon-to-come Faptoberfest, I forgot everything I was supposed to do. It wasn't until around 8 p.m. that I started to hear a barely audible crying from outside. It wasn't human, but it still had that strange whimper that drew my attention. I flicked the porch lights on and checked out the window. There was a small black cat that, when I opened the door, limped across my back lawn in the direction of my barn. The door was now closed, and as strange as this seemed to me, I was more uneasy than scared. I figured my dad must have put something away and left it. I walked down my driveway, peered into the dark room, and heard what sounded like gasps for air. Now completely freaked out and discouraged by the fleeting light, I turned around and ran towards the house. Not 2 steps later, I hear shattered glass on the back of the barn, and I freeze. What walked towards me was a dark brown animal, no larger than a fox, that started bounding towards the closest trees. It zigzagged to the edge of the long grass, then stood up and waded through the woods. I still to this day have no idea what it was, but the broken window was blamed on me, and my sighting was never explained. And the final nail in the coffin, 2 of the cows, which were freaking huge, were found with their necks torn open while they were still inside their pen. Everyone on my road blamed coyotes, but to this day I know it was something else. What's the stupidest piece of advice someone has given to cure a disabled or chronically ill person? I have chronic migraines and have been getting about 15 to 20 a month since 2017. A well-meaning Facebook friend suggested I put a banana peel on my forehead because your body will absorb potassium into the brain. Yeah, my 6 different meds, physical therapy, rigid sleep and eating schedule, Botox injections, among the many other treatments that the PA, my primary doctor, and my neurologist all recommended, didn't fix my migraines, but this random person read the banana peel thing on the internet, so it had to be true. Dude, I feel the sarcasm. Like I've literally said, yeah, good thing you told me to take essential oils. You just cured 7 years of chronic throwing up that 12 doctors and 9 specialists couldn't. Do people even think before they speak? Sometimes I wonder. I was told to drink a mixture of different cooking oils, like a cup of oil, mixed with sage, oregano, 2 different kinds of teas, and something else. Someone convinced my family member that that concoction would stop my organ failure. Another said I needed to visit her magical vet who would know exactly what to do to fix me. Also said I should get off my pain medication because apparently that's what was causing my organ failure, not the string of birth defects that I had. Needless to say, I didn't do any of that and I'm now post-transplant surgery, doing much better. Nowhere near perfect, but good enough for me. Family still offering stupid advice to fix me now, so I get irate and sarcastic at the mention of juice cleanses and foot pads that pull out toxins. Lupus here with bad photosensitivity. People just tell me to go out in the sun and exercise so I can get more vitamin D. My friends tell me to eat more to cure chronic nausea, which prevents me from eating. Vitamins instead of Ritalin for ADS. Also, vitamins for autism. Also, never get vaccinated because autism. My mum is so much fun. Ye old fascination with neurodivergence and somehow curing a mental state of being that most of us just sort of get at birth. Never change, crazy mom. Actually, no, wait, please change. Really, you and everyone else will be better off. Having kids will cure your mental illness. Fricking lol. For bladder issues, drink more water. Drink less water. Have you tried cranberry juice? It actually sucks since it's acidic and makes things worse, by the way. But my favorite is, have you heard of Kegels? No, I've had this problem for years and years, been to multiple doctors, and I've never ever heard of Kegels. Thanks, I'm cured. Kegels. I had someone tell me to put tea tree oil in my underwear when I had a monster kidney infection from chronic utis a few weeks ago, 'cause burning my lady parts would definitely cure that kidney infection. I got told to drink apple cider vinegar from a doctor. She then consented to order a scan. I needed surgery ASAP, turns out. My wife has chronic fatigue syndrome. For over a year, she's been dramatically limited in her ability to work, socialize, take care of chores, you name it, she struggles to do it. And here's the thing with CFS. You know you have it when all of your tests say you're healthy, when diet changes, rest and exercise don't help, and when you've been sick like that for a long time. Generally, the worst advice she gets is the well-meaning, simple advice. Have you tried going to bed earlier or going to bed later? Have you tried waking up earlier or later? Eating more or less of this substance? Going for walks or doing weights? Or it goes on and on. It's not the worst advice because it's even bad advice for general health. Nobody we know is telling her to inject bleach or drink colloidal silver. It's the worst advice because it's so thoroughly condescending. It amounts to saying, I've made no attempt to understand your condition, but have you tried not being a helpless moron and doing this incredibly simple and obvious thing? If you know someone with a chronic infection and you hear about some research or medical trial or anything along those lines, they'll probably be happy to hear about it, even if they've heard about it 10 times before. But I know you're sick, but have you ever tried being healthy? Will not make them feel better. Years ago, a fellow patient recommended a supplement she swore by. Went to GNC and it was pricey enough to cause me to delay the purchase. A couple of days later, it was banned by the FDA due to more than a few sudden deaths. I think I dodged a bullet. I had a family member tell me I should wean off my beta blocker medication with B vitamins. Without my beta blockers, I'm bedridden. B vitamins aren't going to do crap for that, plus most B vitamin pills make me throw up. Had a doctor tell me that my chronic utus was just mind over matter, and that if I just told my bladder to relax, it would. Turned out the chronic utus was from nerve damage due to a progressive spine condition that would have eventually destroyed the use of my legs, bladder, and bowels without surgery. We all get the do yoga, gluten-free, accept Jesus Christ into your heart suggestions, I'm sure. I have PCOS and possibly endo. My favorite piece of advice is to just ignore it because it's all made up and in your head. Yeah, no, I have ultrasound and blood work results that say something very different. Everybody has had trouble falling asleep at least once, so everyone thinks they're qualified to diagnose and treat clinical chronic insomnia. Shut the frick up about limiting screen time and warm milk and not turning the AC on. I've tried everything you can think of in every combination already, but sure. Your solution is definitely going to be the silver bullet. I recently told my father that accepting my irregular sleep and wake cycle has been the first thing in a long time that's improved my quality of life and productivity. He immediately began to tell me that I should use that forward momentum and focus on having a regular sleep schedule so I can wake up and go to bed at a regular time and be a better person. Rare liver disease now on a transplant waiting list. You should take turmeric. It's yellow and you go yellow. Remember, like cures like. Do more sports. How is doing sports going to cure endometriosis? There are cells growing somewhere where they shouldn't. It's been linked to estrogen, but honestly it affects so many women of all shapes, sizes, and fitness levels. Sports are neither the cause nor a treatment. On a side note, the best theory on why some women get it was proposed by some American lady. Apparently, I'm doing the deed recklessly with demons and that causes endometriosis somehow. Specialists told me that I just needed to go for more walks. Took me another 4 years to get fibromyalgia diagnosis, then another 4 years after that to get diagnosed with 3 minor heart problems that were just enough to exhaust me doing nothing. I'm now on beta blockers and don't get winded every time I use the stairs. I thought all you fit people were sadistic masochists and that you enjoyed pain and feeling tired. I was checking in for a doctor's appointment for an unrelated procedure. The nurse saw on my chart that I have celiac disease, so she recommended I go to see a medical medium who, I crap you not, is a man who claims to cure chronic illnesses by talking to dead people. She said he could cure my celiac, an autoimmune disease that doesn't have a cure. This registered nurse actually wrote down his name on a post-it and handed it to me before continuing to check me in for an MRI. It was surreal. Yeah, a lot of nurses are into quackery. My source is that I work with a lot of nurses and I've often had to bite my tongue. I know more than one nurse who opposes vaccines, sadly enough. I work with a nurse who didn't eat pork for religious reasons, but also thought that if you poured wine on raw pork and sealed it in a container, it would spontaneously sprout maggots. Like, that's not how any of this works. As a man who has nothing but respect for every nurse I've ever met, I wonder what happened that these people got through the pretty intense nursing schools that the ones I've known have had to qualify from. And how have they still had such crackpot theories about basic medical and nutritional science afterwards? It boggles the mind. This piece of advice was given not to me, but to my mother about me. When I was younger, I had an awful dust and pollen allergy and initial symptoms of asthma. It was in the early 90s and proper treatment wasn't available in my country, so my father would bring me meds from one of the Western countries. Inhalers, antibiotics, ointments, you name it. Anything to stop me from suffocating. Up until I was 4 years old, I was either coughing or suffocating, and there was nothing in between. At the same time, I was prescribed really strong antihistamines, to at least reduce the reactions. As meds worked on my airways, but not additional stuff. Rashes, sensitive skin, dryness. for example. See, my father's mum thought it was all a big scam. Had it happened now, she'd probably be an anti-vaxxer. But back then, she focused on the fact that my mum was just being young and wanted her child to feel special. Funnily, my mum is as sensory sensitive as me, and my coughing was driving her mad. She used to shout at me a lot. My grandma suggested it's all the meds that I'm taking that are causing my issues. She took me to the clinic and asked for an allergy test that I'd had done on me repeatedly when I was really little, as my mum had no idea why her child keeps coughing and getting chest infections all the time. So one day she comes home, a slip of paper in her hand, yelling at my mum that she's a liar and trying to throw all of the meds away. The slip of paper is from the clinic stating that I have no allergies. No pollen, no dust, no food allergy, nothing. My grandmother just keeps screaming that my mum is poisoning me and that she's a young fool. My mum was in her early 20s at the time. What you need to know about my mother is that she's little, but fierce. You wouldn't suspect so, she's so petite. She stands up and just yells, "How can she have any allergic reaction to anything if she's on medication that stops her from having that reaction, you idiot?" Basically, my medication was helping with large amounts of the allergen, so that my mum wouldn't have to vacuum every 6 hours, only every day. On no planet would I have a reaction to a tiny diluted sample on my arm. My allergies did subdue when I got older, and I never needed an inhaler to function. Anxiety causes some of my problems with breathing, and I'll never be a professional athlete. But I don't need any meds now, because it got sorted when I was young. I can't imagine what would have happened if my mum actually liked and respected her mother-in-law and actually listened to her. I once had someone try to cure my extreme depression by explaining to me that God will turn his back on me if I ever delete myself. Wow, frick me. I almost forgot that eternal damnation will wait in the corner. No more thoughts of not wanting to be alive anymore. Thanks, random lady in psychiatric hospital. People think all kinds of things will cure endometriosis, leafy greens, B vitamins, pregnancy. I also had a boss turned client say, upon hearing about me having surgery a second time, that I bring it on myself by not taking care of myself enough. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Just keep pushing yourself to exercise, building up how much you do, then bingo, you'll be fit and cured. I have CFS, literally the opposite is true. Also, yoga, breathing, swimming with dolphins, black walnut extract for everything I've ever had wrong with me, who knew it was a magic bullet, mindfulness, go vegan, stop being vegan, and changing my attitude. All these are things I've had suggested. My MS is caused by a food intolerance, and I need to use elimination dieting to figure out what that food is, and I'll be all cured. My sweet grandma can't seem to grasp the concept of chronic illness, and suggests all kinds of things to cure my fibromyalgia. The fact that I'm slowly finding things that work for me, things that I can do to improve or control my symptoms, seems to be proof to her that my disorder is curable. Yes, Grandma, I am improving. Looking back to a year ago, I'm definitely doing a lot better. Yes, I tried that drink additive you suggested, but it caused a flare-up. I wore the energy concentrating essential oil necklace and it gave me a rash. That whole grain bread you brought me was tasty, but I don't feel any different. All her suggestions are usually silly things like that. I'm happy to try new things in case it does make me feel better, but it's a bit of a crapshoot. New things can also make me feel worse. A lot worse. It's a little painful when she visits and tells me she still has hope for me. Can that hope please be for realistic improvement and useful symptom management, instead of desperately trying to make me like I was before? I'll never be that energetic again, Grandma. I've mourned it, I've let it go, I'm living my life anyway. Please accept that. Fricking okra for type 1 diabetes. Yes, it's a good veggie, but the best way I've ever had it cooked is like the opposite of good for that. Deep fried in something delicious at an Indian buffet. It's really handy as an ingredient when not deep fried though. I haven't had that much success steaming it yet, but I will. To suck it up. You have no idea how many times my own father and mother have told me to suck it up and live with it. Then again, my mother did lie to my doctor and family saying that God cured my hearing. I'm hard of hearing, by the way. When in reality, it's gotten worse. As an extra backstory, I have fibromyalgia, chronic, and scoliosis that both make my life a living hell as a 16-year-old. Accept Jesus into your heart and he'll protect you from all illness. This medical nugget was given to you by a Jehovah's Witness at my door that I opened as I was recovering from surgery. I thought it was my brother with my pharmacy pickup. When I tell you that I have chronic daily migraines, please don't tell me about your headaches. Don't tell me about your sister-in-law's hairdresser, just agree that it's awful and tell me you hope I'm having a low pain day. That's the narrator's approach to people telling him their troubles these days. Most of us just want commiseration when we're suffering or sad. A sincere, "that sucks," is a fairly safe approach if you just don't know what to say and often find yourself agonizing over a perfect answer. They'll probably ask if for some reason they think you have good follow-up advice. I have EDS. I was told to just stop hyperextending and then I wouldn't be in any pain. I can't just stop it because I've walked a certain way for my entire life, and when I did try to stop it, I ended up popping out a joint. Also to stop taking painkillers because it was ruining my motivation to get better. EDS is incurable and with few treatment plans, so nope. Has anyone tried to tell you that you should try collagen supplements? Because that one annoys me so much. Ingesting collagen isn't going to stop my body from making collagen wrong, but thank you for the misguided advice. Dude, just be normal. This was said to me in response to my diagnosed depression. Eat the thing I'm allergic to train my immune system not to attack it. Just think that one through. And yeah, I know it can work in some situations, not mine, under medical supervision. I'm talking more about a coworker saying I should try a bite of her pie to desensitize myself. I'm mildly depressed, so I'm not sure if this counts, but someone told me to get over myself and quit acting like a depressed little turd. And yes, those are their words. Go vegan for psoriatic arthritis, fibromyalgia, IBS, PCOS, and CPTSD. The one that really annoyed me was the CPTSD, because apparently I was absorbing the trauma of the animal products I ingested, and that was the cause of it all. So there you go, it wasn't the horrible life events that I'd encountered before that point, it was having cow's milk in my tea. I'm a vegan and I have several chronic illnesses. If veganism was a cure, I'd be the healthiest damn soul. I hate when people think veganism and chronic illness are even related. I've been told to try meat and milk, like maybe people need to learn not every disease can be helped by super specific diets. To eat more. If anorexic recovery was that easy, then I would have done it already. Even when I was, as stated by a doctor, 3 days away from dying, I still wanted to exercise and do press-ups, so much so that I went and did 20 in the hospital toilet. I'm quite open about my AN as it's a disease which is often misinterpreted and often associated with the desire to look thin. In some cases it is, but there's a whole heap of complications that come with it. Fun fact, AN has the highest mortality rate of any mental health disorder, as far as I'm aware. A psychiatrist recommended vitamins for my depression that he conveniently sold. I didn't go back to him. Just to stay positive and pray and it will cure me. Also that my pain meds, that are the only reason I can function at all, are holding me back from recovery. De-stress, breathe more, pop an Advil, take a nap, exercise. For fibromyalgia, IBS, endo, migraines, and fatigue, like literally I couldn't be less stressed and more into breathing, and Advil and naps and less able to exercise than I am now. I know all of these are a sliver of my self-care, but people and all of my doctors act like they cured me with these tips. I pick my nails and skin on my toes when I need distractions. My toes and feet in general are pretty messed up because of untreated trauma from childhood. I barely have any nails on my toes, can't grow proper nails. My doctor told me to buy some luxury foot cream and a luxury foot bath thingy, and then take a foot bath 2 times a day and massage my feet with the cream. I have depression, anxiety, PTSD. People have told me just exercise. I would, but it makes me feel even worse emotionally. Have you tried keto? No, I have a weird case of reactive hypoglycemia. If I don't eat a moderate amount of complex carbs, I will 9 times out of 10 lose consciousness before going into ketosis. Believe me, I've tried it, Karen. I was once told that my depression was punishment from God for leaving the Catholic Church, and if I went back, it would go away. It had nothing to do with the PTSD that I'd developed after being severely bullied or the family history of varying mental illnesses, apparently. Besides, my ex-church pushed me away because I dared to think that I could have nuanced discussions regarding different religions. They really just wanted to force-feed you their beliefs and you just had to blindly accept it. I wasn't very welcome for all the questions I had in retrospect. The worst one that was given to me was sunshine for depression. To quit taking my rheumatoid arthritis medications, aka poisons, and switch to a vegan, gluten-free diet, aka clean and will heal better than those poisons that you put in your body. Yeah, diet changes can help with inflammation and related symptoms, not going to do crap about the fact that my immune system thinks my joints are problems. This is a fairly frequent interaction when people find out that I have RA in my early 20s. Oh boy, we're running into a lot of people who've had bad run-ins with the plant-based crowd, I see. I promise that not all of them are this annoying. It is generally a pretty healthy thing if done right. Just check with your specialists before taking it up, people, and don't expect a magic change. I have EDS among some other things, and I've been told to do yoga, literally the worst thing for EDS, to exercise more. Yeah, no, that's how I dislocate things. To stop thinking about it so it will stop hurting. To take collagen supplements. This isn't going to change the fact that my body makes structurally useless collagen. To stop all of my medications because they're clearly making me sick. And to stop wearing braces because they're just a crutch. No, they're there to keep me from subluxing all day long. My mother told me that God would cure my chronic illness if I allowed him to. Thanks, Mum, for making living with diabetes my fault. I have sleeping troubles. Literally, and no joke, the advice was, just sleep. After a brain injury, I've been diagnosed with MDD, GAD, chronic migraines, chronic fatigue, and dysautonomia or POTS. Here are some of the bullcrap various doctors have said to me throughout the process. You haven't found a job yet because employers can sense your depression in an interview. And no one wants to work with a depressed person, so exercise more. It's all in your head. Ignore it and see what happens. It's not affecting your ability to work, so why does it matter? A neurologist told me the numbness and fainting was because of my mental health. I was evaluated by a psychiatrist who said that's not true, and the neurologist didn't change her mind, just said, there's nothing I can do for you. Yoga for fibromyalgia. I got told to exercise. I was housebound at that point. Smoking green herb isn't the cure-all that everyone seems to think it is. Oh boy, where to start? My sister-in-law has insisted every ailment, including my fibro, can be cured with ionic foot detox baths, biohacking full-body vibration plates, diffused essential oils, NAET therapy, repolarized water, black cumin seed oil, charcoal pills, eating spoonfuls of coconut oil, pre-methylated vitamins. I'll add others if I can remember them. If this counts, a coloring book for depression. I went to a therapist in college because I was really struggling. High-stress situations with school and work, plus anxiety and depression, were not fun. I left the place with a coloring book. No coping mechanisms, no breathing exercises to use when I get stressed, a coloring book and some unsolicited comments that had absolutely nothing to do with anything. I'm saying that there aren't enough hours in the day to work, go to class, do homework, eat, sleep, and shower, and you want me to take an hour out of my day to color because you can't be stressed when coloring? She should have been fired. She worked for the university. Another student I knew went to her. She came back to the office more upset and with bubbles. That crappy therapist is part of the reason I'm on the path to becoming a therapist. I know I can do better than that, and I don't want anyone else to ever feel unheard and like they're being rushed out the door, or that the therapist just doesn't care that you're ready to jump off a bridge. What are your best examples of people exhibiting the Dunning-Kruger effect? Which is when people are too ignorant to understand why they're wrong. I fix boats for a living, and I can tell you there's probably no subject in existence where everyone knows better than you than boats and boating. To quote someone on a repair, "No, that's way too much for the work here. Tell them their deck is rotten from years of water seeping in? No, you're wrong. I take very good care of my boat. It's actually crazy." I called for a service on my AC. The guy comes out, says everything was fine and it was working in that moment, so I pay the fee and he leaves. 3 weeks later, the unit fails and I call another company to have a look. I was giving the story to the tech and I said something like, "The other guy tested everything, but that doesn't mean a component didn't fail after he left and before you showed up." And this guy was startled. He told me very few people understand that can and does in fact happen. Well, I work in IT and have had to have this discussion many times with people. When I was in high school in the 70s, I thought that I was a good singer. I sang in a couple of bands. Later, I built a recording studio and worked with bands, learning more and more about music. The more I learned, the less good I believed I was, but I kept practicing for years. A few years ago, I took vocal lessons from an excellent teacher. I believed I was close to being a good singer and just needed some minor tweaks, and he showed me how far away the goalpost really was. Looking back to high school, I sucked while believing I sounded good. My dad thinks he's the man at day trading and the real estate market because he once managed to make money on both of those. So he keeps buying more stocks, and he keeps making plans to become a real estate agent. He buys self-wealth books and buys into pyramid schemes. He has no certifications. Now he's in debt because of bad trades and pyramid schemes, but he's still convinced he's going to turn it around and become rich. Yeah, I've always been a little cynical and assumed that even if you had good instincts for the stock market, it's still risky, but it definitely sounds like what your dad is doing is just straight-up gambling in all but name. The guy needs help. My boss, who got fired for unrelated reasons. A few years ago, this guy, who's the stepson of the company's founder, president, and CEO, was made national director of sales. He was out visiting one of our job sites where we were building a new location and started talking to the superintendent and project manager. I heard this story from the superintendent himself, and I 100% believe this is true because the guy is a nightmare and the superintendent is a badass whose specialty is dealing with idiots. Also, the CEO basically confirmed the whole thing on a phone call 2 weeks later. So this idiot was saying, "Why do these buildings take 8 months to build? You should be able to do them in 5. The supervisor says, "The plans are for 7.5 months, with a few weeks thrown in as safety for weather, subs that don't show up, supply delays, among other things. We can't build them in 5 months. If absolutely everything goes right, we might be able to do them in 7. That's ridiculous. Just schedule things tighter and make it happen faster." That's not possible. I've been building these things for the company for 6 years now, and we absolutely cannot do it in 5 months. Look, just put me in charge and I'll get it done. You'll see. I've been working in construction for 30 years. You've never worked construction a day in your life. You have no idea what you're talking about. The guy at this point starts fuming, screaming, and making a complete butt out of himself. "How dare you say that to me? You have no idea. What gives you the right?" "Because it's true. Now get off my job site before I call the cops." Obviously, dimwit boss went crying to his daddy almost immediately. Luckily, his stepdad is actually smart and level-headed. Apparently, the conversation went something like this. "The superintendent said I have no idea what I'm talking about because I've never worked construction and he threatened to call the cops on me if I didn't leave the job site." And the CEO answered, "Well, he's right. You haven't even swung a hammer before. And what were you doing there anyway?" The CEO then banned him from visiting the construction sites ever again. A random person started debating me about the statistical significance of the work I was doing. He's studying philosophy while I'm studying statistical science. I did do him the respect of paying attention to him because there's always a possibility that I've made a mistake, but that wasn't the case. I work for a financial institution, so I have too many examples to count. Mostly people that try to argue math when it's done by our system automatically. Both my brother-in-law and his now ex-wife. He thinks he's going to retire in 10 years. He's in his 20s without a degree. Even billionaire tech startup geniuses don't retire 10 years after their 20s. She can't figure out how people know so much about the shenanigans she's pulling with her custody agreements, denying my brother-in-law time with his child, among other things. She thinks she's blocked everyone in the family on everything, but then she lets strangers add her on Instagram all the time and she publicizes her wrongdoings there. Yesterday I got into it with a guy who was raging that the new iPhones don't have cameras with, quote, more megapixels. Well, I design consumer electronics for a living, including some with cameras, so I mentioned that having more megapixels doesn't automatically mean the resulting image will be better. I pointed out that there are many factors that go into making a camera produce better images, and that the number of pixels is only one of them. I also pointed out that if you don't improve the other things along with the pixel count, increasing the pixels can actually produce a worse image sometimes. Well, he wasn't having it. To him, more meant better, no matter what. Decades of customer electronics industry experience couldn't hold a candle to his observation of, 10 is better than 20, duh. Unfortunately, most people don't want to learn anything from anyone who might be aware that they're sharing new information. I got lucky sometime in my teens when I realized that anyone who is accurately correcting me is giving me the gift of replacing something incorrect in my thoughts with something that is correct. My elder brother asked me for a copy of the Bible once. I said that I had a couple of them I'd inherited and asked which one he'd prefer. He asked, "Well, is it Old or the New Testament?" I was like, it's both of them." "Well, that's stupid," he said. "They're the same thing." He said this very confidently. It turned out he thought the New Testament was just the Old Testament in updated language, like reading Beowulf in modern English, and it was surprisingly hard to convince him that he was wrong. He was so confident about this ridiculous statement that remembering it makes me laugh to this day. I kinda hope that someone listening to this also got their minds blown by this fact. I can see why he was confused about that if he was coming from a place of ignorance, but fighting over your error when you just clearly don't know from the outset is what makes him a dummy here. We resent baselessly defending something that you know nothing about, not ignorance. I feel like a lot of the smartphone wars from back in the day were just people reading off spec sheets at one another without either person knowing what they were saying. My coworker who ignores every stated protocol for someone with his job description. All he's required to do is gather the data to be entered about the customer. Each time he tries to enter the data himself, he hasn't been trained for this. Why? Because he's computer illiterate at age 68. The customer can wait 4 to 24 hours for the data entry to gain them normal customer access to our business. There's nothing immediately necessary for the customer. I've complained, he gets mad, he's quit, and then he's come back. He kept doing it. Boss does nothing. Meanwhile, to fix his mistakes takes 48 hours longer, bothers the IT person, creates more work for more departments, and the client has now received poor customer service. I mean, it's protocol for this very reason. Last time he did that, our entire department and the IT guy refused to help him fix his mistake. The customer repeatedly came in on his shift and asked why the perks weren't set up yet. This coworker of mine then yelled at me, "What was the problem with it?" And I calmly said, "I don't know, Bob. I'm supposed to be the only person who's supposed to contact IT. This situation happens when another coworker doesn't follow protocol. I guess you need to figure it out yourself." He walked away and in front of customers yelled, "Frick that. I fricking won't comply. It's customer service." The customers were shocked. I filed a formal complaint on him for disturbing customers. Guess what? He now complies. I post on the Out of the Loop Reddit a lot, which means I invariably have to deal with people who have, let's say, an opposition to reality. The most recent note on one of my posts was a complaint that I included too many facts and sources as a way of confusing people. For real, the argument was that I was providing so much evidence that conflicted with their worldview that I was obviously just lying to them, so I couldn't be trusted. How do you even argue with that? A coworker argued to me that he's not racist, he's just prejudiced towards certain races. I told him that's the literal definition of racist, and he said it's different. Tax brackets. In the US, personal income tax has always been a progressive tax, meaning that as one earns more, one pays a higher percentage, and it's designed in such a way that earning more never results in a net loss to the earner. Plenty of people insist that going into a higher tax bracket can and does cause a net loss to the individual. That's not only untrue now, it's been untrue for as long as there's been personal income tax in the United States. I know a guy who's told me he's against gay marriage because the Bible says it's wrong, but his reasons for being against it aren't religious. What?
Actually, the amount of people who don't understand what the Dunning-Kruger effect actually describes but use the term all the time anyway.
I work at a car dealership and people honestly have no fricking clue what they're talking about when it comes to their vehicles, but they'll always swear they know more than you. My favorite is when they say, "Well, I read on a forum that it's X, so why are you telling me it's Y?" Or, "Well, my mechanic said that it's in good condition." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My coworker is convinced that aspartame causes brain cancer, and when I told her it didn't, she asked me how I was sure I was right. I informed her I have a degree in medical technology with a focus in chemical testing. She then laughed at me and told me I was way out of my league because chemistry and food science are different fields of study. She has a 30-year-old degree in social work. We both work the same entry-level position. My mum thinking steam is a virus.
Oh, it's only a virus to my wallet.
A very deep south old lady I was talking to once said,
I'm not racist, I just think they,
by which she meant black people,
should stay in their place.
She felt the same way.
I'm not racist, I only fulfill the exact criteria for racism,
she says underneath her Confederate flag in the living room of her dilapidated old Southern manor, surrounded by long untended cotton fields. I did accounting for insurance policies. Customers would constantly ask for audits. Nearly every audit was done because the customer was just one payment behind. When I started at the company, I wasn't assigned audits, but was amazed at how many I saw coming through the department every week. Hundreds. Many of them were re-audits of the same policies too. After a couple of months, I got curious, especially because these customers would occasionally get transferred to our department when they became insistent. The first time I saw how my coworkers were auditing, I knew exactly what was wrong. Instead of telling the customer the exact date each payment was received, the audit just stated the month and if a payment was received. So January, yes, February, yes, etc., etc. Not only that, but they had a strict policy of going only 6 months back. Most customers had a due date at the beginning of the month. They'd send their payments out a few days prior, so let's say someone skips a month, possibly years ago, then they continue to send their payments at the end of the month. A payment that was due on the 4th but arrives on the 31st, and the audit will show payment received for that month. But boom, new payment is due 4 days later. I present this to my supervisor and he just did not get it. He kept saying, but if they paid that month, how are they behind? Because they skipped a payment at some point possibly years ago, and this has been floating ever since. This isn't advanced stuff. I took over the audits, it didn't even take much extra time. I sent an audit as far back as the late payment to every customer who had a request. We went from 100 audits a week to about 5. My supervisor never figured out how I did it. Worked on a group project as a final exam on my sociology degree. My group consisted of 5 people, myself included. This one guy, you know the kind of guy, he's done great before uni by being a suck-up to teachers. He came across as a very competent guy due to confidence. During the initial process of planning, he'd interrupt everyone saying, with resignation, I'll just do it if you guys can't. Even though our competence was never really an issue. We made him write the entire chapter of theory, and we had to edit it fully 2 times because he obviously didn't understand it. The project is written in our mother tongue, but almost all the literature was in English. So the majority of the chapter was just quotes from articles, which he couldn't translate or tell the meaning of. He later translated indifference to alienation. He wasn't involved in any data collection and didn't understand basic math. When we explained what the hard data meant, he said that he didn't agree with us and just couldn't see it from our point of view, despite the data not being relative. He still had that I'm better than you attitude, and alas, at the exam, me and another student got an A and he got a C. He still thinks he's smarter. My dad absolutely refuses to acknowledge that Finland exists. Even when I show a map to him and show him Finland, he'll adamantly deny it exists. So I work on a service desk, and it's just everyone, really. Saying everyone else is wrong except for you might just be the best unintended example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. This one guy, who's a climate change denier, got into an argument about it with my friend. He ended up saying, wow, look at you, you got all liberal. You'll believe anything you read on the internet now, huh? Please note that my friend was an environmental science major in college. Yeah, my dad told me no hurricanes hit the US for 18 years before Katrina. When I showed him Wikipedia has maps of every hurricane to hit the US since the 1880s, it's pretty cool, he told me he doesn't care what evidence I found on the internet. He shut up when I reminded him we were in Florida for a hurricane in 2002. I know a guy that keeps saying he wants a house that's done, as in well-kept, in great condition, and with some property. He makes $11 an hour and has 3 kids. He won't apply for another job. He keeps renting. All anti-vaxxers and racists I've ever met or heard about are prime examples of the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm a Mexican girl now working in a tattoo studio as an apprentice. I get to use the place and practice. In exchange, I have to clean it and help with clients. Also, they pay me like $40 a week, and there's this tradition where an apprentice starts in a studio and they have to learn from someone else. Now, the thing is that they've got a lot of trash that shouldn't be on the floor. I'm talking used gloves, used towels, even pieces of metal from piercings and needles. This is contamination and dangerous as frick. In the moment you start a tattoo, you've got to be as clean as possible. At least that's what I thought. So I kindly asked them to throw the biotrash in the trash can, and they took it badly. Since you're the apprentice, you've got to deal with that stuff. And I'm like, can we take a moment to understand that it's not hard to throw some dangerous material where it belongs? I know they're just teasing me, but heck, these aren't Kleenexes, they're towels with blood on the damn floor. Comments 2 through 4 in any video game sub on patch day. As a Helldivers player, I feel this in my soul. Some people really just hate change, and it's baffling to imagine getting that angry about nerfs and balances. I don't think the internet will like this, but an analyst of China named Gordon Chang. He wrote a book called The Coming Collapse of China, in which he explained why China would fall within 5 to 10 years. The book was published in 2001. Shout out to all my colleagues who spent a day training on SQL and Excel and think that they're somehow data engineers. My old roommate talking about how the world was only 6,000 years old and the dinosaurs were wiped out by the Great Flood. I brought up carbon dating and she said it was a myth created by the devil to lead people away from the truth. Remember that episode of Futurama where Leela goes back to that orphanarium and she's like a legit space captain and has good friends and is doing pretty darn great, and she's proud of herself? Meanwhile, all the other people at the reunion are like degenerates and addicts and homeless and crap, but when she tries telling them about her success, they just patronize her and are like, "Oh, that's so good for you. You should be really proud of everything considering you only have one eye." That's how my family treats me, except I have both eyes. To all my peers and myself, I'm successful, but anytime I cross paths with my mum's sisters and brothers and all their offspring, they just patronize me and talk down to me, even though by all rights they have no leg to stand on. They're just miserable people. Jail time, addictions, kids that they didn't want and can't afford, all living in squalor, but apparently because I don't go to church, I'm a moron, and if something happens to me, it's luck. Or someone feeling sorry for me, and that's why I get opportunities, out of pity. The whole thing is bananas. I once had someone explain to me that Superman could be the Man of Steel, but Supergirl couldn't be the Woman of Steel because a uterus couldn't be made of steel, so she wouldn't be able to carry children. I tried explaining that the uterus in Supergirl's body would have the same cell and tissue structure as the organs in Superman's body, but to no avail. From anyone else, I would have assumed that this was an anti-feminist comment, but from this guy, it was just a pure lack of understanding of how the human or superhuman body works. There are professional athletes who are experts in off-season sports moves. This summer, Antonio Brown was convinced he was one of those guys. I'm pretty sure Antonio Brown still thinks he's one of those guys. Antonio Brown is not one of those guys. My brother-in-law trying to convince others that coal was the most beneficial to the environment. As a bartender, I've had customers and staff telling me I'm wrong for doing certain things with drinks. One, floor staff telling me that there was no head on cider that he was bringing for someone. When I told him you don't give cider with a head, he stared at me and kept telling me that you do. And second, a customer just last week complained about getting a lime with her tequila, that only lemons go with tequila, and proceeded to drunkenly lecture me which drinks lemon and or lime goes in. In truth, you can use either lemon or lime, I've just been told lime. My mum thinks that using a tanning bed before going on holiday will prevent skin cancer. She then tells me that being an undergraduate doesn't make me smart, and that I can be wrong about things. Any conversation I have with client techs or colleagues about my politics, I'm in a conservative industry, but I'm a leftist, specifically part of the libertarian left, not a big fan of centrally planned economies or authoritarian single-party democracies. Like, they don't even have the proper vocabulary to have a conversation about politics outside of the very narrow Overton window of mainstream American politics. I tried showing one idiot a political compass to explain to him what people mean by libertarian socialism or left libertarianism, and he just started frantically saying, You're making that up. You're lying. You're making that up. Even as he couldn't find any of the supposed myriad YouTube videos that prove that you're lying. I also got accused of fabricating the life, works, and existence of fricking Proudhon by my manager, a right libertarian. I would like to buy Greenland. The idea is absurd. Well, that's just a nasty thing to say. In this example, person A is too ignorant to understand why the proposition is absurd. As a result, person A is only able to interpret person B's rejection as an insult rather than an astute evaluation of the proposal. What happened to the weird outcast at your school who everyone made fun of? Still holding his head held high while dressing up as Ishigo or Naruto and going to the obscurest anime fan meetups. Good for him, I suppose. He died in a fire. It was sad. I wasn't friends with him because our schedules just didn't sync up, but my best friend had some classes with him and they were buddies. The outcast didn't do anything super weird, he just had really long hair, thick glasses, and read Harry Potter all the time and was super poor. His parents had some family staying in the backyard in a camper van. They had daisy-chained a bunch of power strips and extension cords. It caused a fire in the house. The mother, father, and older brother got out. When the outcast didn't come out, his older brother went in after him. They both died. They found the older brother collapsed at his side. It's interesting, actually. When he died, it became trendy at school to pretend he was your friend before he died. Everyone talked about how they missed him and how he was such a good friend. Even the people who would mercilessly tease him did this. Most of these kids went to the grief counselor too. Everyone deals with grief differently, and maybe they felt guilty they treated him like garbage. But they still continued to ceaselessly make fun of my friend who had been his real friend, so I don't think they actually gave a crap. A kid I knew in middle school was weird, really into bats, wolves, and other things. He seemed nice and we all egged him on to do the wolf man, and then he'd growl and snarl and make weird faces. He also barely talked, and when he did, it was murmurs. He was sort of weird, but nobody was ever mean to him or made fun of him. We just sort of accepted and embraced it as a class. A few years later, after going to different high schools, I heard he got expelled for biting a kid. I can only imagine how that went down. Moved 1,000 miles away, learned a trade and did quite well, joined Aryan nations along the way somewhere, died in a motorcycle wreck aged 38. Oh boy, that turned real dark real quick. There was no weird outcast at my school. Oh, crap. Yep, I love watching realizations happen in real time. But there actually were no outcasts at my high school. Oh gosh darn it. Got caught selling crystal at the drive-thru at a local taco joint. Good old small towns. He married a popular girl and became the most popular teacher at the same school. Oh, you know, just drove his car into his ex's home and then riddled her and her new boyfriend with lead. It turns out he's autistic. We just didn't have a word for it back then. Now he's involved with taxidermy. The kid got expelled and went to prison on 6 counts of arson 2 weeks before graduation. He lit 6 portable toilets on fire and is still in to this day. Man, that guy must have really hated porta potties. There was a girl in my grad class who was brilliant, 100% or more in every class and very motivated with her studies. She didn't have any friends and people knew she was strange, but everyone kind of left her alone or was nice when they came into contact. She ended up staying in my hometown, pretty small, only a community college with not many programs. I don't believe she ever went to higher education. She ended up self-deleting a year after our grad. A few things I should clear up. There were often bonus points on exams and assignments, and that's how she got more than 100%. She said she didn't want friends, and there were people willing, but she didn't believe in friendship. I also believe she had a very good support system at home, but she had an anxiety disorder, which she was getting help for. And finally, if anyone is in this position where they're lonely, please know that it can get better. It might take a bit of effort and reaching out, which I know can seem impossible, but people are generally very receptive and friendly. I made friends with her in school because I knew it sucked to be alone and different. I was exposed to mentally handicapped people since my mum worked at a care facility and cared for them. 12 years after we kind of stopped talking and led our own lives, she tells me she got married and thinks without the friendship we had, she wouldn't have had the confidence to do a lot of the things she had done and is doing now. I don't talk to her anymore, but she's happily married, holding a steady job, and had a kid last time we talked. Well, one of the well-known fat kids in my school moved to Alaska and lost all of his weight. and I'm pretty sure the other one decided to fight on the other side of the war on terror. I started working customer service thinking it'd help me build up my social skills. Fast forward 10 years, I still work in the service industry, have great social skills and also hate everyone, am broke and want to not be alive. He doused himself in gasoline and lit himself on fire when the popular girl he asked to prom declined. He survived, barely. It's been about 15 years and he's now unemployed and lives with an awful bully of a woman twice his size who cheats on him constantly. His life hasn't gone so well. To explain, the girl who rejected him was and is a really nice person. She had a steady boyfriend and had given the outcast guy no indication she had any interest with him. Also, I didn't mean to offend anyone specifically by pointing out the size of his current girlfriend. I just find it interesting that he ended up with someone more than 450 pounds who treats him so terribly. She uses her size to be intimidating, and I don't think that's ever okay for someone to do. Of the ones I know, one unalived himself a couple of years ago, and another is working at a gas station. Not my school, but my ex-wife's. Mousy little nobody, a year younger than she was, turned out to be Janis Joplin. Dropped out of 3 or 4 different colleges and became a furry. For starters, threatened to kill all 5 non-white people in my school, and then said he'd come back and kill all the people who picked on him. Thankfully, me and a few friends tried to be friends with him. We knew he was a loner. He ended up in jail for the unspeakable act. I was that guy, currently working on my master's in counseling so I can help other outcasts with developing the skills they need to become successful adults, including coping skills. He plays video games professionally now. I don't feel comfortable giving a name, but he plays Dota 2. He isn't a top player, but he's played in many tournaments and he has his own article on the Dota 2 wiki. I heard from him recently, as in like earlier this week. One of the weird guys I went to school with got charged with 50+ counts of indecent exposure. So for him, not so well. It's a sad thing to realize that the most populous answer is like a 50-50 split between they ended up doing really well and they ended up doing horrible things to themselves or others. I hope that we avoid a lot of this second group with proper counseling that kids might get these days, but I'm a little worried. Answering for my brother. He was a short, tiny kid in high school with acne problems and not the best hygiene skills. I knew he didn't have many friends, but it wasn't until I met a girl who was a freshman when he was a senior that I learned he was the outcast and he was made fun of constantly. And he didn't really have friends. In my eyes, my brother was this awesome, funny, great guy, so this really blew my mind. He wound up joining the army at 18, grew to be about 6'4". He advanced quite fast in the army and did really well for himself. He's out now, serving in the National Guard still, moved across the country and is working on obtaining a degree, and is well-traveled with plans to open his own business. He's the most outgoing person I know who can make friends like nothing and loves making people laugh. I knew he had it in him all this time, and it's sad that the kids in high school couldn't see that. Despite being more than 30 years old, she somehow managed to Facebook friend almost every single person we went to school with going back to kindergarten. Kind of odd that not only would she add them all, but they'd all accept her friend request. He posts space facts, unwarranted like. Rumor has it that she still runs around at break growling at people and pretending she's a dog, cat, vampire, werewolf, dragon, seagull, lion, jaguar, whatever she feels like that day. This was in middle school, she was 13. She chased me into a bathroom and bit me once. They work at a convenience store down the street. They seem happier now, even though they still don't smile or speak much. I was nice to them in high school, so whenever I go there, I always say hi, and they seem happy to see me. He unalived himself. I never knew him that well. He seemed like an okay guy and kind of a character. He drove a hearse. He became a smack addict. When he tried to stop, he had a heart attack and died. He was a genuinely nice and good-hearted person as well. Rest in peace, Will. For those of you who are struggling with addiction, my heart is with you. It's a hard road. For those of you who think you're really funny guys for making fun of my deceased friend, or making light of the situation, that isn't yours to make light of. And coming back and reading them really annoys me. Here's hoping that you don't lose anyone the same way. In middle school, the school nerd was this kid. Let's call him Jean-Luc. It was a rough school, predominantly Latino and black, and he was this gangly, awkward white boy with glasses and an enlarged esophagus, so he was always foaming around his mouth. He smelled like dirty clothes, his teeth were always grubby, and his hair was always overgrown. He routinely just acted weird and didn't really have any friends. Fast forward post-high school graduation. He and I had gone to separate high schools, but he lived in the same neighborhood as some of my friends, so I'd occasionally run into him. He'd taken to wigger style, which was really cringy. This overweight, awkward white boy, same glasses, same foamy mouth, same terrible lisp and poor social skills, living with his parents. By this time, it was apparent that he was slow, so to speak. I have a cousin who's also slow and made the mistake of inviting Jean-Luc to a party where he got caught tickling his pickle in a back bedroom and then lashed out at everyone when they made fun of him, eventually turning a knife on someone, and the police got called. Fast forward to about 2 months ago, I was hit up on Facebook by some guy with a Latino name who said he was Jean-Luc and wanted to reconnect with me. I checked the photos and yep, it was him. I guess he changed his name to something more Latin-sounding because he thought that might make him cooler? Who knows? But he's not at all Latino. Anyways, I asked him what he was doing in life, and he said he's in prison, but he can still talk on the phone, and asked for my phone number. I declined, but asked why he's in prison. He didn't answer, but in his Facebook pictures there's a series of pictures where he's clearly had the crap beaten out of him, so my guess is he got in a fight that ended badly for someone, and he's going away for a while now. In short, it turns out the middle school nerd was slow or mentally disabled. Everyone made fun of him for being weird, but he really had a genuine disability and probably shouldn't have been in mainstream school, let alone the crap one we went to. He ended up going for prison for some kind of violent act. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was the kid who was bullied a lot in school while also being bullied at home. Tried to self-delete a couple of times, it didn't work obviously. Now I'm almost 18, stressed out of my mind working a fast food job, going to school and doing theatre. I'm losing my hair and a lot of weight from the stress and exhaustion, but I still have a whole life ahead of me. Got a boyfriend who treats me well, and I'm looking into a career in musical theatre. So all in all, I'm healing, and I'll get there someday. I had a pretty darn good life. Almost 5 years in the Navy, followed by a 33-year career and retired at 54. Many of them are still working. I've spent the last 8 years in therapy, I'm still living at home, I don't really leave my house except for the occasional late movie night. I'm too much of a nervous wreck to hold down much of a job, and now pretty much all of my contact with the outside world is done through Facebook and Reddit. He surpassed the entire graduating class in looks as well as tact and class. Right on to him. Maybe the bullying carved character into him. He was magnanimous at the class reunion. I was the weird kid. Now I'm an artist and a drag queen. Drag queen? You definitely won. Takes guts and a big brass pair to do that stuff. Much respect. Yeah, I mean, great for you. In my mind, this isn't too far removed from any other specialist interest kid like the ones who played Dungeons & Dragons or theatre, who was laughed at in school before finally leaving and finding their people years later. It's a wonderful thing to happen, and we're happy for you fabulous performer. I'm browsing Reddit. He decided he didn't want to be alive anymore after being expelled from our middle school for hacking into the school computers and changing his grades. She started making adult films with her boyfriend and putting it on the internet. Oh wait, that's me. I was the weird outcast. Haha. One day I realized that having no reason to live also means I have nothing to lose. I hit a critical point where not caring about anything became not giving a frick about anything. Hiked most of the Appalachian Trail last year without ever having hiked before because screw it. Going back for the last leg this year because screw it. After that, I'm moving to Vietnam to teach English because screw it. I think he's a shift manager at Sonic now or something. Has a girlfriend, even. Miss you, Snaggletooth. The kid was a refugee and came to a new country and new school, and instead of welcoming him and helping him adjust, the small class just made fun of him. Now he's a deadbeat. I'm not sure if it was all the trauma of fleeing a country or the trauma of being a social pariah for years on end. And sure, kids get picked on, but he left school without any friends. I don't recall him being invited to any parties, even the big ones. Can you imagine, day in and day out, no one even noticing or caring about you? No one to share your feelings with? No one to tell about your good days or your bad times? It's one of those, if I could turn back time things. I'd definitely have more compassion toward him. I wasn't the weird outcast, but I was never super popular. I got picked on and bullied just because when I'd started to fit in, we'd move. Then I had to keep starting over, new school, new people. Kids weren't as accepting of new people as they are nowadays in my experience. Anyway, I ended up dropping out and went to Job Corps. Got my good enough diploma and have been through many jobs over the years. Dealt with massive anxiety and depression. Through a series of very fortunate events, I now work at my youngest son's elementary school. I have various things I do there, from lunch cashier to reading tutor for 8 students. I volunteer in several classrooms, helping the teachers with whatever they need. I assist in running a food pantry once a week out of the cafeteria, and I just started an after-school Lego program with a small group of kids that focuses on building relationships with each other and teamwork while utilizing Lego. I'm working on going to school to get some certifications I need to become a preschool assistant next year, and then I think I'm going to go for some degrees to someday have my own class. I feel better than I ever have in my life. I'm making a difference in people's lives. That probably saved my life. Looking at all your other stories kind of made me sad that so many stories end badly or, well, ended at all. I just turned 40 and it took half my life, but I'm finally beginning to live. I read something a while back that really gave me inspiration to keep doing what I'm doing. Be the person that you needed when you were younger. I started doing all of my stuff because I wanted my son to have a better experience than I had. Now I'm doing it because all of the kids deserve to have that chance. Went to prison for unaliving his awful father. Got help, got successful after release, happy and healthy with a wife and 3 kids. Still has cooties. Not me, but my parents went to school with the OKC bomber back in the 80s. I was the weird kid. There were stranger and more mentally off people than me, but I had no friends and was bullied quite a bit. Girls would date me as a joke with their friends to see who could break up with me in the worst way possible. But I graduated early, saved up money, moved a state over, met my wife and got married 3 months later. All of this happened within the year I graduated. I'm moving to Europe soon to be with my wife. I'm going to a free college in Europe, married to a very beautiful, amazing Euro babe, studied law. I'd say that pain and suffering I was put through finally ended and helped me become a better person. I was that kid. From my first day of first grade to my last day of my senior year in high school, I was made fun of daily. I fell into severe depression and attempted to unalive myself a few times because of it. I never thought it would get any better. I had and have clinical depression on top of it, so that made it harder to deal with. I'd fake being sick by mixing random condiments and food in the toilet and telling my mum I threw up so I could get out of going to school. I had a few times where it got so bad that I planned to rampage and unalive some of the kids I went to school with. My dad owned a lot of weaponry, and I knew how to use them. I had a mental breakdown one day, and in the midst of it, I told my mum about it, whilst also telling her either I delete myself or all the kids hurting me. She grabbed me and cried, begging me not to be a statistic. Now I'm 24, I have my own house, my own car, no kids by choice, a decent paying job and a boyfriend that loves me. I still have my bad days, and I still have days where I think about crap that happened to me in school and it makes me angry. I still have clinical depression and anxiety. I still have my psychotic moments, but I went to therapy for them and I know how to cope a little better now. However, I try telling myself that it's all behind me and I'm no longer a child and I don't have to be forcibly subjected to that any longer. Those people didn't matter back then and they sure don't matter now. I've had a couple of people from my school days apologize to me, and I see a lot of them that have gone to prison or are in prison right now, have multiple kids that they don't care for or don't want, are on substances, or are just generally unhappy. I take a lot of pride in seeing that my life is better than their lives. I guess that's all that hatred built up inside me. I switched from being obsessed with anime to being obsessed with cacti. I have a pretty okay collection. I only started in late 2015 and it's coming along slowly, but I'm pleased with it. This certainly wasn't the biggest compared to some of the rags to riches success stories that we've seen so far, but it might be the cutest, most wholesome one we've had, so well done there. Her locker was next to mine in high school and she reeked of body odor. She was odd and would often talk about her rabbits or would mention things like, she was unable to cut her hair until the new moon. Now, she's a gorgeous model, and I'm wasting my Saturday night writing a story on the internet. All of these remind me of Tyrone. None of his classmates liked him because of his stupidity, especially his teacher, who was also yelling at him, "You're driving me insane, Tyrone." One day, Tyrone's mum came to school to check on how he was doing. The teacher told his mum honestly that her son was simply a disaster, getting very low marks, and that she had never seen such a dumb boy in her entire teaching career. The mum was shocked at the feedback and withdrew her son from school and moved out of Detroit, relocating to Cleveland. 25 years later, the teacher was diagnosed with an incurable cardiac disease. All the doctors strongly advised her to have heart surgery, which only one surgeon could perform at the Cleveland clinic. Left with no other options, the teacher decided to have the operation, which was successful. When she opened her eyes after the surgery, she saw a handsome doctor smiling down at her. She wanted to thank him, but couldn't talk. Her face started to turn blue. She raised her hand, trying to tell him something, but eventually died. The doctor was shocked and was trying to work out what went wrong. When he turned around, he saw our friend Tyrone working as a janitor in the clinic, who had unplugged the oxygen equipment in order to connect his floor buffer. This was a joke, by the way. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.